Thank you for being here. Welcome to Law and Licensing Committee. It is 9:15. We have with us in person, myself, Matt Hymas, we have Carol Lear, Leanne Wood, and online we are joined by Vice Chair Joseph Carey. And is Member Hart with us yet? Okay, and we'll wait. We'll keep an eye out for Member Hart. So we have 4 of us currently. Let's go ahead and jump in with our first agenda item, item 3.1. This is public comment. And we have, what's that? Okay. And so we have Sharon Smith with us online for our first public commenter. Sharon, we'd ask that you keep comments, of course, clean and professional. I'm sure they already were. And then we ask that you take about 2 minutes and then we'll go to the next. Thank you. Sharon, can you hear us?
Yes, sorry. Is it possible for Julie Seeley to go first? We're here together.
Oh, okay. We were watching for her. That's fine. Julie, go ahead. All right, Sharon, we don't hear or see Julie.
Okay. She told me she was getting on. Let me send her a text because she has the information before my information.
Okay.
I'm sorry for the delay.
No worries. Yeah, let's
5 minutes ago. So
Sharon, why don't we do this while we're waiting for Julie? We will jump to agenda item 3.2, a recognition, and then we'll go back to public comment.
great.
Okay. So this is agenda item 3.2, recognition of progress, achievements, or improvement. And we have Milo. Milo, I don't know how to say your last name. Why don't you introduce yourself and
Awesome.
I'll learn it.
Yeah, give me a second to get the slides up here going as well. But I'm Milo Mon. So Mon, Pokemon is the best way I tell my students to remember my name or whatever. But yeah, so Mon. I'm the secondary science education specialist here at USBE, and I'm here to highlight IC, which is IC stands for. I can do 2 things at once. Here, desktop. There we go. Up on the screen. So IC stands for Informal Science Education Enhancement. And there we go. It's up now. And I've brought with me Nick Hoffman and Jacene Walker, who are 2 representatives from the IC organization. Nick is with Red Butte Garden, and Jacene Walker is with Clark Planetarium. And they're going to share with us some of the cool things that IC does in the Utah schools. So if you click on the speaker button, you'll be able to talk.
Cool, thank you. And is it right, we have a sheet to pass out?
Can we pass that around? I'll bring it around.
Cool, thank you, Milo.
Thank you, Milo. So while Milo's doing that, good morning, members of the Law and Licensing Committee. Yes, my name is Jacene Craven Walker. I'm with Clark Planetarium. I've been with the planetarium since 1987 when it was the Hanson on State Street. Love teaching those kids, a lot of influence. We are members of the IC Collective Informal Science Education Enhancement. There are 10 line item members and 1 Utah State University Extension is an RFP provider. So the IC Collective hits targets grades K through 12. Discovery Gateway, Leonardo, Ogden Nature Center, Thanksgiving Point Museum of Natural History, Hawkwatch International, Red Butte Gardens, Thanksgiving Point, or Living Planet Aquarium, Utah's Hogle Zoo, Clark Planetarium. Can you tell I teach kids? So We hit all of the grades. Not all of us hit all the grades. We have our specific core curriculum that we hit. The planetarium hits mostly sixth grade, 6.1.2, 6.1.3, moon phases and eclipses, etc. So we are grateful to be here. We have been going strong for a long time. The Hanson Planetarium was one of the first science providers in this legislative item, and we are happy to continue doing that. Nick.
Cool. So yes, we wanted to highlight, if we could skip to the next slide, if that's okay. We wanted to highlight kind of the services that we provide. We have kind of a suite of programs that are funded through the science outreach line item, but the primary one is statewide outreach to schools. So that chart on the left, which is also on your handout, shows the number of kind of student experiences that we've been offering for the past few years, and these are out in schools across the state. We do have additional programming that serves folks through field trips and teacher trainings and resources provided directly to teachers. We did take a bit of a dip in the year 2020, but we've shown really good progress increasing, serving more than 250,000 students statewide last year. One primary feature of this line item is that we are required to match one-to-one the funding that we receive putting into these programs, and we exceed that match significantly. So for every dollar in funding that the IC organizations receive, we put back another $1.41. So it is we are exceeding our match by a good and healthy amount. I was going to highlight briefly the different program types that we offer. It's okay to jump to the next slide. The primary program that is offered is statewide outreach. So as Jason mentioned, we have programming that serves targeted grade levels, targeted seed standards. Each organization does visit every school around the state over a 3-year period that has that grade level. And that is the primary focus that we have, is providing these resources statewide. IC funding also supports field trips, which is the next slide, if that's all right. So field trips at no cost to schools to these organizations.
It's on Milo's, but it's not on the screens.
Most of our organizations do offer field trip programming. Again, these are seed standard aligned programs. And then we also have a very strong suite of teacher trainings, curriculum development, and teacher resources that we offer. Again, seed standard, seed aligned, and while the outreach is very particular grade targeted, through field trips and teacher resource professional development, each organization does serve a broader range, not just one single grade, but is able to serve a broader range through curriculum development.
Thank you for letting us present. Any questions for us?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments? And I'm going to jump in just real quick. I want to say thank you for what you're doing here. I look back and reflect upon my experience as a child, and I don't remember the lessons in particular, but some of these activities and experiences and experiments, that's what stands out. Not to say the others didn't have an impact, but children remember these, and it does have an impact. And oftentimes it kind of drives their interest into, yeah, I do like that. I think I'm going to explore more of that. So we really appreciate, I really appreciate your work here. Thank you. Member Wood.
Yes, science is my thing. So I appreciate what you do. I had 2 questions. When you say the one-to-one line item, is that the individual organizations providing that match?
Yes, the individual organizations do provide the match from separate funding sources that they raise through a variety of means. With the 11 organizations, we do have very different structures and funding types, but they all match with at least one-to-one. And that graph that we had, the 1 to $1.41, that is a collective kind of our average group.
Nice. Okay, that's great, because there's so much investment on your part to get that investment back. And my second question was, did you get an increase this year?
We were discussing that. I thought we did. There's discussion that we haven't, so I need to touch base with Ben Leishman, the fiscal analyst for public education.
Yeah, I think we're all in that kind of realm.
It's a limbo.
What actually happened when
Agreed.
the clock struck midnight? So,
Agreed.
yeah, all right.
I'll
Well,
let Milo know, and then Milo can let you folks know.
okay, I appreciate
Thank you.
that. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time and your presentation. Appreciate it. Okay, it looks like we are joined by Julie at this time. So we're going to jump back to public comment. We also want to recognize that Member Hart is with us online as well. So we do have a full committee. So public comment, again, we ask that comments are appropriate and professional and stay within around 2 minutes. And so up first, we have Julie Seeley joining us via Zoom. Julie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead when you're ready.
All right. I apologize for being late. I got on and my Zoom had to be updated before I could join yours. So the last time I did Zoom, it wasn't up to the date that yours is. So I apologize for that. Thank you for allowing me to make public comment today. My name is Julie Seeley. I'm a retired teacher and coach with 28 years of experience at Altamont High School. I'm here with Sharon Smith, a concerned parent who will be speaking later. We represent a group of parents, teachers, employees, and concerned citizens. In fact, we have collected 180 signatures from individuals opposed to this waiver. You should already have received a copy of those signatures. We believe the request for waiver is unnecessary based on faulty data and research and lacks a compelling rationale. We believe it will ultimately be detrimental to students, families, and community members. More details about our concerns can be found in the packet you received from Board Member Moss. The current data on attendance and achievement under the What is the Problem tab does not justify a move to a 4-day week. Altamont is doing well in both categories, except for the elementary that has an attendance issue on Mondays that will be intensified by this move. Current research shows that the 4-day school week has a negative long-term effect on student learning. Over time, the effect is equal to the learning loss during the pandemic. In addition, research shows that social development and nutritional issues also arise. Under the unintended consequences tab, we have included data about the Altamont schools. Of great concern to us is that due to the high number of students in our schools suffering from food insecurity, over 16,000 meals will be missed during the year by students on free and reduced lunch alone. Other studies point out there is a causal link between the 4-day school week and an increase in juvenile crime. A study from rural Colorado shows a 20% increase after schools moved to a 4-day week. Research also indicates that the 4-day week has a neutral effect on attendance. Since the impetus for this change seems to be athletics, we've identified and shared specific examples of negative effects on the extracurricular activities with Committee Member Wood, including loss of participation opportunities, loss of coaches, and scheduling issues. We believe this change will create more problems than it could possibly address. Sharon will continue with problems about the process used to arrive at this decision and unintended consequences and other concerns. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Julie. Sharon, you're next. If you can hear us, go ahead.
I can hear you. Good morning. My name is Sharon Smith. I am the mother of a sophomore at Altamont High School who has special needs, and I believe this waiver would be detrimental to his education as well as all students who attend the 4-day week. We've identified several unintended consequences and additional concerns that will cause further damage. In your packet, you will have more details on this. I will simply list a few of these and ask you to take a look at the information given to you. The lack of childcare providers in Altamont, financial risk to classified school employees, longer, more intense days for all students, reduced recess and lunch, especially for elementary students, reduced opportunity for junior high sports, negative effect for CTE and concurrent enrollment and partnership programs. We also believe the process was flawed, and we have given you 180 signatures from those in our community who are opposed to this waiver. The initial online survey was riddled with technological issues. There were parents and most of the elementary teachers that either didn't receive the survey or couldn't open the link. This survey was sent out in May of 2023. Then we didn't hear anything else until December 2023. They didn't hold any community meetings. The initial survey only received 204 responses, of which 112 were for it, including 51 students. This was 54.9%. Just a reminder, we have 180 signatures opposed, and the board vote was narrow also, 3-2. Despite concerns from the elementary principal stating several times at board meetings that this schedule was not beneficial to elementary students, the board passed the proposal. Only after the vote did the board decide to do an opinion poll for the elementary, and it was biased toward the 4-day week. A copy of the survey is in your packet. During one of the January and the February board meetings, I signed up to speak during open time. One board member told me they wouldn't answer my questions because they were talking about the elementary. The next meeting, I was told they wouldn't hear any more comments on the 4-day week. I was trying to present new research, hoping they would listen. We are here today because they wouldn't. We thank you for your careful consideration in this matter and for your efforts on behalf of our community and children, and ask that you deny this request.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, we had one more. We don't see that online. If they reach out, if that individual reaches out, will you just ask her to send an email to the committee? Okay. Thank you. All right, let's move on to agenda item 3.3, annual training draft schedule and prioritization for development. I believe we have Dr. Thronson.
Yes, hi
Who's
there.
gonna- There she is.
Thank you, Chair. Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. And Ben, if possible, it sounds like you're facilitating. If you can open up the document for the motions. So I was here in January.
Dr. Thronson,
Yes,
we're having a hard time hearing you. We heard everybody else clearly,
okay. How about
so we
now?
think it might be you.
Like trying to put this piece to my mouth. Let me, hold on.
Does that,
I know it's wrong. Give me 1 second.
now we can't hear you at all.
Okay.
There, now we heard a laugh, but it's still a little faint. I'm sorry.
Any better?
That's it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Good. Okay,
Yep.
great. All right. Thank you. I'll just hold this up to my face and hope that that helps aid. Okay. So I was here with all of you in January to talk through the next steps of the annual training. And in that meeting, there were several motions made that this committee approved. And so I'm just basically back to respond to 4 of those 5 motions. One of them I did not move forward on until more direction comes from this particular request. Then I can work with finance to look at the cost side. So the motions are there at the front that you've got. And so we've got identify a user group for including various partners. Oh, that one we were on was perfect. Thank you. Then we had the identify a list of training priorities. Based on lots of data points. So from audits and reports and LEAs, and it was a lot of kind of data conglomeration. So I'll share with you around what those training requirements could be in terms of like a prioritization, knowing that there's over 40 training requirements. Which ones do we want to attend to first as a board for prioritization? And the funding proposal is the one motion that we will not be diving into today, just because without knowing which modules or how this proceeds with a little more feedback from the committee, it's difficult to come with a actual solid proposal to work from. Number 4, though, we were able to look at like, why would we want to offer this? So I've given you some short description on that. And then obviously number 5 was to come back to committee, which is where we are today. So if you scroll down, so we've got motion 1, which was to identify a user group. And so between the January meeting and this one, I've reached out to various groups to ask for recommendations based on the requests from this committee of who might make up that user group. And that user group will vary based on training. So if it's on sexual harassment, or if it's on defensive driving, or if it's on human trafficking, the expertise of the educator lens of who might be most appropriate for that will vary, but there'll be a body of membership that would be the same across trainings. But we definitely want to have expertise coming in for those different aspects. So you'll see here the kind of lists there. I've asked different groups to give those recommendations. So you have the local board member, the USBEA, recommended Mark Clement for the district superintendent, USBA referred Superintendent Young from Duchesne, 3 school principals. I've reached out to UASSP and UAESSP, and they are working on recommendations there. Go ahead and scroll down. 3 district leaders, specifically from kind of that human resources perspective, as the training aspect really falls into their realm. I've got 3, well, I have 2 there. They also sent me one just the other day that I wasn't able to put back up from Weber School District. So there will be 3 district leaders in that space, waiting for the Charter Association to recommend 2 charter leaders. And then the relevant educators and personnel, this goes back to what I was saying just a moment ago around, it will depend on the USBE specialist. So for example, in the document, if you scroll down to the table part in this document, just to give you an example of like what staff members are relevant, in the final column, you'll see the additional details column. Those are the staff members that are oversee that particular component of training. And so when we do the student discipline plans, we would have Becca Ray come to those meetings and be part of those, and also help to recommend people in the field in her space that would make sense to be on the committee. So it really would be digging in. The user group would have some variety on it, depending on the training, but it would also have a stable core. Go ahead and scroll back up to where we were. Trying to speak to the page as you guys see it. Okay, and then we've got that kind of piece. So that would be the user group. I would love to pause there and maybe just go motion by motion and get any feedback that you have. Board member Lear shared in advance of this meeting, there were a few of the training she thought it'd be really helpful to have one of our AAGs serve on. So I've made note of that in my version. We would love for discussion if that seems relevant. But in terms of the USBE staff, that if we're talking Title IX, we would likely want to have an AAG on that particular one. That's where in the user group, the 1 to 2 USBE staff kind of comes into play. So we might have Katie Chalice from privacy for something, but we might also need the AAG for a different aspect of that, just to make sure we stay within the law. So that's kind of where the user group, based on the feedback previously from this committee, where it's kind of landed. Would love any feedback you have on revising that user group so that we can consider that motion closed and can move forward with organizing that group.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Thronson. Let's committee, let's talk about this first motion here. I see a hand by member Hart.
Yeah, I think it's can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's exceptionally good work. I think this is thorough and exactly what I was hoping for, at least. So kudos. I'm really excited to see what kind of synergy can come out of these groups. I'm really impressed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, member Hart. Member Lear.
And just so as a first kind of, it's hard to know where to start. I mean, I feel your pain because I'm sure it was hard for you to figure out how to start recruiting people or prioritizing the trainings, but it just struck me that with the district leaders, let's see, one district superintendent, and I don't want to try to micromanage, so I'm just offering this as a consideration. You've got a small district superintendent, and I'm thinking that if there are 2 superintendents available, one from a larger district, one from a small district, or rural and urban, that you might get a better perspective on what districts need. So that's just a suggestion.
Dr. Thronson, do you have, I don't know if there was like a specific design about it that we could understand, or do you have a comment or feedback to that?
Yeah, I honestly reached out to Dr. Cunningham and asked for representation, and I believe I asked for 2 just because typically this feedback is expected in terms of like, we want to make sure we represent the state. And I was provided with Superintendent Young. He is wonderful, and he's on the meeting today, so I'm sure he's like, yep, that's my job. But I would be happy to go back to Dr. Cunningham and make a request for a second superintendent to serve.
Is that member Lear?
I'm not, yes, and I'm not insisting. I'm just saying if there's one available, I'm sure that Superintendent Young would be great. You might get a different perspective if you talk, because I know a lot of large districts provide this training, and you might hear a different story from them than you do the smaller districts, which is still okay. I'm just suggesting that might be something to think about.
Thank you, member Lear. Any other feedback from the committee? Member Wood.
Just a question. We see all the faces on there. Are these members of the committee? Like who? Just for other items. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So are we, let me ask Dr. Thronson, are we to put forth a motion here?
That's what I'm
Is that what the
thinking. If we
request
can
is?
Make a motion that says we approve the user group as defined in the backup. I don't know how you guys, I don't write motions, so maybe Ben can help us. But if you would approve the user group so that we feel like that is the composition of the user group and we can move forward with that. And with the, I'll make the note of adding another superintendent. So we might want to say we approve the user group to include 3 district, like that same conglomeration, but we could put 1 to 2 superintendents, and then we can use that as our pieces. And if I can use the chat today, I'll put what I think the motion could be in there real fast to make it somewhat easier.
So it looks like Ben is going to split out these motions. We have. Okay. So
Does she need a, well, I'm feeling a little off balance. Does she need a motion about what to do next or?
I think, so for this one, correct me if I'm misunderstanding as well, but we're making a motion. We have 4 different motions here, or what are they called?
You could make all 4 of those motions together at the end of her presentation if you want.
So Ben,
Oh,
if that
I'm
works,
seeing.
like if they approve the
Yeah.
user group as written, basically, right? It's going to be 1 district superintendent. Do we want to put a part that says the makeup of the user group as written with the potential of adding another superintendent? I just don't want to add it later and be like, that's not what the motion was, if that makes sense. I want to be sensitive to.
Right,
sticking
but
to what we're
I think we
approving.
could make the motion at the end if.
Well, we can make it at the end, but I would like to Dr. Thronson's point, I'd like to make sure that we're all on the same page. I'm fine with just one. I think Superintendent Young would represent very well. And I don't
Okay.
know if these are rural or big district issues rather than just a broad state level training. Is that, and I could be wrong, but I'm not opposed to 2. I just, if Dr. Thronson originally said, I think 1 is sufficient, I'm kind of there as well.
I'm
but-
not insistent. I just know that I would like, if the board goes to the work of doing this, I would like it to be something that all districts can benefit from, which is why I'm thinking the perspective of a bigger district might also add, and I hope Superintendent Young is not taking this personally at all, but I just think that a big district perspective, if they say, if the districts that represent or that include 60% of our students or 70% say, this is just a waste of time for us, then I want to know that. Or we have 5 trainings that we would really like help with, but the other 15, it doesn't help us. So that's my point in hearing the perspective of a larger district superintendent.
Is this something, Dr. Thronson, that could be brought back to committee if there are changes necessary
Or-
Yeah, that might
or
be a
the-
great
Even
way to
left
handle
open.
it.
I don't care.
or left open? Yeah.
I don't care that it's every detail of this is buttoned down right now. If she keeps working on this and it turns out that there's another superintendent available, that would be ideal. If there isn't, then we just move forward and because there are a lot of other people who are from bigger districts who can represent that perspective.
Well, and maybe the,
Well, let's
the way to
get
do
to-
it is
oh.
you approve the makeup of the user group as a minimum as written, so that it's like, this is the basis and it can be flexible if it makes sense for a particular training that we bring in
Yeah.
someone not on the list, so that you guys know this is the core group that is expected, but we're going to leverage expertise when needed. And that way, if we can get another superintendent, we can add that on for a flexible aspect.
I agree.
Okay.
That sounds great. There's Molly's better.
Let's jump to Molly. She's got a hand up.
Yeah, I would like to put it all in one motion because each of these motions would be, if they were separate, then they're voted on separately at the board meeting. and I think that's too granular. I just feel like that kind of goes into stepping into kind of management. If we wanted to start a motion and then work through it, we could move that we accept the user group, the makeup of the user group, and then
As
just put a comma. Yeah, as right. And then just put a comma and then work through the next piece. Or we could simply say that we accept the recommendations just overall. I don't want the board to get into that management space. So I think that it's great that it's broken down by what we asked for, but I don't think the motion has to be broken down as far, because when it gets to the full board, then it feels like we can discuss those things. And I don't know that I want to send that signal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll still, so I think we're in agreement that we'll have the motion at the final motion at the end. But we'll just go through these one at a time and make sure we're ready on each one.
Yeah, I think breaking it out is super duper actually, for framing the discussion. But the end motion should be something like we move to accept the annual training plan as presented, or whatever.
Okay.
Just my thoughts.
Thank you. Member Wood?
Just a question, is there a way on that number one that we could put the minimum recommended makeup of the user group, or wherever that minimum would live appropriately, but that it can expand as necessary? I agree with Member Lear in that some of these may very well need perspective from a different lens.
Yeah, and I don't think we're committed to, so, I mean, what happens if we don't have, for example, you have 3 district leaders, but only 2 here, right? Does that mean if we don't, I just imagine this, we have to be flexible here, right? This is going to change, I would guess. Dr. Thronson, maybe you can speak to that, but is there something that we need to put in the motion? This is what you're getting at, that offers that flexibility to say, you know what, so-and-so had an unexpected event, they're gone now, right? We got to replace or not have that part in our committee, so.
I think if you all trust me enough to.
Oh, we lost your voice again. You got super quiet on us.
How about now?
That's it.
Okay.
Okay.
I think if you all can feel like you can trust that, like, we've come to a common agreement that this is the core group, and as things shift in terms of personnel, those names are who are in right now, but it's the roles. So we're going to have at least 1 of these, 2 of these, 3 of these. If you're good with the kind of overall makeup, and we can have the kind of agreement that the flexibility is there, as long as that kind of core group positions holds, I'm okay with no amendment specific to motion 1. I just want to make sure I don't upset you down the road by saying, oh, we added a superintendent like Board Member Lear wanted, but the document said 1. Does that make sense? Like, I want to keep you all happy as your staff.
Member Wood, follow up?
Yeah, I guess I just worried that without something in writing, we may have some that in the future, well, why did you involve this person? And I don't want to ever put our staff at a disadvantage in that way, that there's a question that we didn't set them up for success.
Okay. So with that, Member Wood, I'm trying to piece together what we're hoping for, and I'm wondering if are you saying, for example, up to 2 district superintendents? So if they do stick with 1, that's fine, and if they do stick with 2, I don't know. I'm trying to capture what we're what we're asking here. If we're good with the motion as is, we've aired our concerns. If we're good with the motion, then we'll move on. If there is something that's we're hung up on, let's get it out, but I'm not sure exactly what that is.
I think it would maybe just be the recommended makeup of the core user group. I think that's the language that Jennifer used a couple of times, or sorry, I don't remember her title.
Director of
She's
Teaching and Learning. You can call me
Okay.
whatever you want.
Thank you,
Okay.
Director Thronson, thank you. So
Yeah, I think that satisfies too. And makeup of the core user group, yeah. Then that suggests there could be additions.
Any concern with that, committee members?
Is it
Member Hart,
possible?
Member Carey?
Is it possible that we just as we're going, we're basically creating draft 2? So if Director Thronson keeps those notes and puts the changes, whatever changes we make, then all we would need to do is forward draft 2 instead of making a motion about each individual thing. We could say annual training schedule and prioritization for development draft 2.
I would prefer that, where the changes are made in a draft 2 that comes forth.
Same.
Okay, so there's at least 4 of us that would prefer that. Dr. Thronson, I'm sure you have the notes necessary.
We lost one of her.
Yes, sorry,
there
I'm
she
here. That works great. I'm going to just put 1 to 2 superintendents for that core group. And then I'll make a note. Other members may be added as needed, and then put that in draft 2 for the board's consideration next month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else on the, I'm calling it the first motion, but we understand that it's not necessarily a motion. But
Yeah.
the title of that is, any other thoughts on motion 1? If not, we'll move to motion 2. Dr. Thronson, please.
Okay, so motion 2 is all about the prioritization of which trainings when. This has been a lot of fun in terms of, we want a 3-year plan. Not all of them are allowable to go to 3 years. Even with some work that we did during session, where we got some of the trainings moved to more flexible every 3 years, they added some new trainings that are every year. And then there are certain ones that are from like OSHA and other federal regulations and such that we do not have the authority to change to annual, like from an annual to every 3 years. Now, with that said, what the training looks like each year does not necessarily have to be the full battery, right? Like, it doesn't have to be the 20-minute training. It could be, we do training every year, but 20 minutes maybe every 3 years, where they're actually going through like a module. And then the other years are like, they have a reading, a 1 or 2 pager that refreshes them on it. That's a potential flexibility point. So what I tried to create was a document that showed what ones we have, like already the flexibility of, like, well, we can do this every 3 years with the annual refresher, as the board has, as this committee has directed. And then at the very end of that table, you will see the ones that we just don't have flexibility, but it doesn't ever say it has to be the same training every year. It just says there has to be training each year. And some of that could be, it's more significant training year 1 or year 3, with kind of more refresher type training in the off years. So it's a little complex. I won't lie about that, but I think it's doable. And so what I've done is I went through and tried to, 1, make it somewhat equal each year of the number of trainings that are required, as well as looking at the data, both from audits, from UPAC, from the recommendations of the groups around like which trainings might make sense to be up first in the first year of this iteration versus the second year, and so on. So that's what you have in front of you. Basically, what I would love is feedback on which trainings ended up where. If we're going to go and develop the trainings, it might make most sense for us to work on the year 2 trainings so that in year 2, we would actually have content available versus the year 1 trainings, given that would be next year. Or if the board wants to kind of delay and say this annual requirements goes into effect in 2025 to give like the LEAs time to adjust, then we could start with the year 1 trainings, and the year 1 are really the ones that are showing in the data that we need to have training. And so there's a couple different ways to do it. Like as I'm thinking through it now, I'm like, well, maybe you actually do the year 1, depending on when you all want this to start. It's going to take us some time to get the number of trainings that you see there in year 1 built. We could say year 1 is starting in the 2025-2026 school year, and we take the next, 16, 18 months to build that out. Or we start with year 2 with what trainings we'll have available. But year 1 are really the ones that the data suggests are really critical in terms of teachers understanding the requirements of law for things like restraint. We have a lot of UPAC violations because teachers aren't well informed around what's appropriate restraint for a student, for example. So I'd love your feedback on all of that conglomeration, but basically I tried to lay out, here's what we would do in year 1 with more in-depth training, where you'd actually have like training modules and videos to watch, but always in each year, you'd still have refreshers on all of the trainings, not just the year 1 training. So at the very bottom of each table, you'll see year 2 and year 3 kind of supplemental training materials will be provided. So questions that you might have or thoughts, or if I missed the mark, would love that feedback as well.
So thank you for that. If we postpone year 1, which I'd prefer that we come out ready. I think it will be less damaging if we're ready to come out with this than if we kind of force it quickly and then clean it up later on. But if we take the time necessary, then LEAs just have to continue as is, right? I mean, it's not like anything changes over the next year or so as we prepare. Is that correct?
Yes, there would be no changes for the LEAs. They would proceed as normal, but they'd also be able to adjust and say, okay, if they're going to come and offer that, we're not going to worry about doing that right now. We'll do that next year. We'll do kind of a lighter touch right now. It just gives them that adjustment period, which I think the LEAs really appreciate when we give them a little time.
Yeah. Okay. Member Lear.
Well, I had a couple of thoughts, several thoughts. First of all, I wonder if we can make this more of can it be kind of a discussion? Is that okay?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
First of all, kind of reflecting back on what Molly said about the potential for a half-a-day board discussion on this, about moving around trainings and which is first and which is more important. I don't want to do that. So I'm more inclined to say accept the schedule as proposed by staff. And secondly, I'm not sure if you're talking about a calendar year, Jennifer, or a school year. So would it be ready?
School year.
So it would be ready not this coming fall, but the next fall?
Following. Yeah, I think it's going to take us with the number of trainings and we do it well and to get the user group and have the feedback loops that we want. I think we need to give ourselves time to do it right. Obviously, we'd have some ready in the fall potentially, but not all of them. Does that make sense? Like having the full battery of year 1. Okay.
But that's kind of what I'm asking. Would you have any ready for this fall?
Potentially. I think if we get approval from you all, some of this has a cost associated. There's the funding part. But I think we could definitely get 1 or 2 done over the summer, assuming we kind of move along and have the funding part worked out by May. I think we can get 1 or 2 of them done over the summer and have those ready for the fall. And it might be a great way to get feedback before we roll into a full year of what this looks like.
Because one of my concerns is we'll have board turnover come the first of the year, probably. So I would love to have this well enough established that it's not completely upended by some different. It would be such a waste of staff time and resources if you get this all planned and started and then another board says, oh, we don't want to do this. I think we'll have a better chance of its enduring, which is such a good idea if we have some good solid trainings that start in the fall. Some I don't know what the exact number is. I would say 2 to 3 at least, if you can manage that. But I also agree with Matt that, and keep in mind, as I understand this, these are optional. So we're not saying, I mean, the trainings that we're talking about are already required. So all we're doing is offering a resource to LEAs. We're not putting in place these requirements. So I think if we could have 3 ready to go by the fall, which might be a push for you, but then they're available, and then we have some substance to this request from the board, that would be my preference.
We have a hand from Vice Chair Carey.
Hey, thank you, Chair. My concern is that, like, are we putting the cart before the horse, in that if we say as a subcommittee, it makes sense to, yes, we're obligated to offer, not obligated, I guess, directed to offer training, but we cleverly say, yes, but the training doesn't have to be the full training. I would feel uncomfortable. Well, let me ask this, Director Thronston, when the new, let's say we do these variations, but we're not offering the full battery of training every year, does the proposed training come before the full board for approval?
Yes. So we would be giving you both like the full battery and the like refresher. So when it says annual training, it doesn't, like, it could be a refresher training. Some of them even say annual refresher, which means you're assuming they already have the basic knowledge. And now you're just giving them a reminder of that knowledge. So for example, bloodborne pathogens, once you've gone through, don't touch it if it's warm, wet, and not yours. Like, you can do a much shorter summary after that initial inauguration into bloodborne pathogens each year after that. With the, like, the plan of this proposal is that every 3 years, you're still going to get the more in depth, but you're not going to just know that in that year. You'll still have a reminder every year in between the more formal years. So I get where you're coming from. But yes, that content would also come forward to the board for review.
And then what happens if we're okay with the full battery of information, but the subsets where we're only offering a refresher, we're not? What I don't want to do is, and sometimes we put ourselves in this position, is where we have to do something because there's not enough time left, right? It's, well, we've got to do something, let's make this happen. So perhaps there could be a default that, look, if for whatever reason we don't agree on the refresher, that the default is, you know, we don't move forward with the refresher, but that we default to the full battery.
May I respond, Chair?
Please.
So I think within this, like, all you would do is amend the schedule. So the schedule currently, like electronic devices, we would move that to every 3 years with that refresher in between. And if you look at that content and go, nope, that's something people need every year, as a board, you guys would amend the training schedule to have that be every year. I think that would be the way that would be handled.
But right now, we don't have to do that because they get the full training every year.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and that's my concern. Like, we're putting the onus back on the board now to say the default is these refresher courses rather than the full course. I'm just thinking it through. I don't have a motion, and I'm not suggesting a change. I'm just trying to think through it. So thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Member Wood.
I have a question related. It's kind of going back to our first discussion, is what is the role of the committee in all of this? If we're putting together this committee, if we are deciding the prioritization of when things should be where and what we're going to do, what are we asking for from this committee?
Dr. Thronson, is that who's that directed towards? Is that Dr. Thronson?
I was thinking that was a board question, but I'm happy to field. My, like, as staff, I would think you approve the schedule. You are going to be the ones who help support with the financial funding, and then staff will go and make those products using the core group, the core user group you provided. So I think other than approving the schedule and going through and amending all the rules that would need to be amended, most of the required annual trainings are in rule, not code. Code requires training, but it doesn't give the frequency in most cases. We at USBE as a board have put in annual. And so that's where flexibility lies a lot in a lot of these in rule. But ultimately, how I would see this is if we get approved for this schedule and this order of prioritization, then that allows us as staff to go forward and do the work of the board through that core user group being our feedback loop and our kind of ultimate, like they're signing off on it, unless you all want to see the 47, or I think there was a few trainings added in session, maybe 50-ish trainings, both the core training and the refresher training. I would have, my assumption was that that core user group was kind of standing in to serve in that capacity. If that is not how you all see this as a committee, please clarify, because I was not planning on bringing back the materials each time that they were completed. Not that we wouldn't share them, but they wouldn't come back for like board review and approval.
Thank you, Dr. Thronson. I just me as I look over this list or have looked over this table, I appreciate the work that's gone in. It looks complex. We know that some of these we think, man, this is important. It should be done every year. But at the same time, the board has brought this forth to staff to say, how do we reduce some of the burden on LEAs? And so this is one of those solutions. If we had more time, I'd love to see these every year in great detail, but it hasn't been working. That's why we're here where we are. So I appreciate the table. I appreciate the work. I'd love to see us move forward from this point with this table as placed. And then, of course, with every situation, as the work goes forward, things are going to be adjusted and tweaked. And you might say, you know what, this year one really does fit better here, or I can combine these 2 or 3 topics into one video. And we kind of talked about that. Now I'm going backwards, but we're going to see some adjustments, right? But I think that this is a great starting point. It's not a starting point for us. Dr. Thronson and her team this is down the road a little bit, but I'm appreciative of the work that we've seen. Molly, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I don't want us to lose what our objective is. I want to go back to what our goal is to come up with an annual training schedule and prioritization for development. We are not reviewing all the trainings. That's not what we're doing. We're creating the framework for managing the number of trainings has really passed a tipping point where we need to group them and we need to prioritize and we need to be more efficient because we just don't have the time. If you added up all the time that it takes to do these trainings, you're talking about full days. So if we wanted to talk about the trainings, that's a whole different issue. And I know I feel more comfortable with the content of our trainings because I've, done them for many years. But this particular item today, what is on the agenda is not the content of the training. It's the structure by which that training is delivered. And I just don't want to go into each individual training. Of course, that's available. And of course, we make rules around them. That's where the trainings came from. But today, right now, what we are talking about on our agenda is the framework. And I really liked the chart. I think we'll find a number of things along the way that we'll want to tweak. I think we should be asking the field for feedback often. I think we should find a group or a district or an LEA that wants to dive in so that we have a group that we can get feedback from. But I really just want to talk about the framework today, not necessarily the content, although of course that's important to the board.
Thank you, Member Hart. Vice Chair Carey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've heard a lot of talk about efficiency, but I really think the focus of this training needs to be its effectiveness. And I hope that when we're saying, hey, we're not going to have to do the full battery, we can do these refresher courses because it's efficient and it reduces the burdens on our teachers and our LEAs. I think that's wonderful. But the reason we require all this training is to either reduce or increase a particular outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be interested in seeing, as we move down this path, how we're measuring that efficacy. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So it sounds like we are good moving forward with this second motion. Let's move on to motion 3. And Dr. Thronson will.
Relief, just one final thought, and that is, I think Member Carey makes a good point. I hope she has a plan that for feedback on the effectiveness, call it what you want, effectiveness, doability of the trainings.
Thank you, Member Lear. Dr. Thronson, if we can move on to the funding proposal.
Yes, absolutely. So the funding proposal was going to be dependent upon whether that schedule changed or not. So if we're going to say, go ahead and proceed on with that schedule, knowing that it may have to ebb and flow because demand happens or our data shift, and that would be from the effectiveness part. We'll continue to look at those UPAC violations. That's why I put some of the things we put in here first, is because the UPAC violations show teachers need to know better about how to do student restraint, appropriate personal boundaries, that kind of thing. So that will be one way that we can monitor that, as well as just using the tools. But number 3 was the one that I was like, we can't really move on that until you approve the plan. So what I would love to do is come back next month once I get with our finance folks, and I already have a lot of the data numbers, to bring proposals of how this could be funded for the committee's consideration to forward to the full board for the funding mechanism. But I didn't want to come with a proposal without knowing which trainings we were going to move forward on. So that one I was not proposing to talk about today. So we can go to the last one.
Any questions or concerns with that committee? We're good with letting the work continue. Member Lear.
So would we still go to the board with this framework? I hesitate to use that word again, but with the framework next month?
I think
Is
so.
that
Because basically we wouldn't want to
bring
I don't want to bring a funding proposal that if the full board changes, like I would have it ready for April. If something happens in full board in April, we would potentially need to amend that in committee in April. But to allow the full board to weigh in on the training schedule, I think would be essential to guarantee the funding would make sense.
But on the other hand, it is a chicken and egg thing. I get it. But on the other hand, if I were a board member hearing about this in April, I'd be saying, so how much is this going to cost? So
and honestly, I will have that ready. So if they ask, because it will be coming to committee the next day, we would be able to answer that question as staff. It just wouldn't have been discussed in terms of approved. And we could say, yes, that's coming to committee tomorrow. Here's the overview. Committee will be discussing the cost and the source of paying for that, for the training.
So what are we asking? So we're asking the board, so we're going to forward potentially 1, 2, and 4 to the board, to the full board in April, but we're going to discuss the cost in April's committee. Is that what I'm hearing?
That was my intent. If you would like it differently, like we could hold and you can just share this get any
So the-
feedback in
we're
April, and I
asking
can
the-
come in
I'd
finance.
like it to move ahead.
part.
I
But
just,
if we do
I'm
that,
just saying.
it delays.
Could you have an estimate? I mean, I know we're in the committee now and we don't meet with you again until a month from now, but could you have an estimate that we could?
Absolutely. We had that in the last meeting. So I could forward, because it wouldn't be new content. It would just be adding that content from the previous meeting. It was somewhere between, I think, 20 and 25,000 per area. But now that we know what the trainings are, like the glycogen, I don't think that's a $25,000 training. So now I can go in and say, here's more the estimate for this year 1 versus year 2 versus year 3.
Yeah.
Because some of those are more simple than others. Like harassment is going to be a fuller training than how to give for glycogen medication.
Yeah. So we could expect for the board meeting, or for the board meeting, we could expect to have you add to this information a year 1 estimated cost. Is that right?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. And I will put like the potential cost and the potential funding source.
Great.
Of where that
That's all I would expect, so that the board's not completely in the dark about the proposed cost.
Thank you, Member Lear. Vice Chair Carey.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, direct a question to Director Thronston.
Please.
So, Director, you said about 20 to 25,000 per, I guess, training. If it's 20,000, what would that total be?
Well, let's look at year 1 for an example. So there's usually like 7 or so trainings per year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if you look at 7, you're looking probably 150,000, just rough estimate of how much it would cost per year to develop these. And then after that, it's a smaller cost for ongoing, or the law changes and we've got to update them. A lot of that will be able to be subsumed, but some of that will still have some cost.
Yeah, I'm going to vote against this package of motions just because I just feel uncomfortable voting for something that we don't know the price tag on. But I do understand the need for it. But yeah, it just makes me uncomfortable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Thronston. Oh, Member Wood, go ahead.
Just a follow-up question in terms of the package of the motions. So we do have this idea of the state providing some. But as far as this prioritizing which ones will be 3 years, which ones will have follow-up on, we want that to happen regardless if we ever make any of these modules, don't we?
I believe that was the intent of the board. Dr. Thronston and Member Hart, I see your hands up. I don't know if Member Hart, you wanted to answer that question or speak to that?
No, I wasn't actually speaking to that. That was my understanding, but I wasn't raising my hand to address that.
Regardless of if we provide the training, that's independent of the schedule. And I think that was Molly's earlier point, is the schedule. That's what we're looking at today.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, before you go on, Molly.
Well, I just want to make sure that we're not, because now we're talking about funding, we're talking about these modules, we're talking about timing, that we don't, I guess, lose the forest for the trees. Like, let's make sure that we approve at least move forward with a motion to the board in terms of timing, because these are all required trainings.
Right, the trainings are required. We're, to Molly's point earlier, we're trying to develop this schedule of training. So whether or not we provide them, the schedule, we still want to go forward. Does that sound correct to the committee? Okay. Molly, go ahead.
So I'm extremely comfortable with hashing out these types of details in committee and then hashing out the money at a board meeting. Hashing out the funding and having that be a discussion is a very appropriate conversation and way to spend our time at a board meeting. So for me, what we really are hashing out is the user group and the priorities and the schedule. And then it's up to the board if the expenditure of those funds is where we want to put our money. So I'm comfortable with it. And also it, like Member Lear said, it's chicken egg. There's no way to put a cost on something that you don't even know what direction the committee wants to go. So I'm not as concerned about the funding proposal because that is an appropriate task of the board and an appropriate way for us to spend our time. I do think that we need to, user group check. The priorities, they're going to be hard. It is going to be very difficult because I think we're going to get into a space where it's all a priority. I mean, how do you, like, for instance, boundaries. Yearly training on boundaries seems to be warranted given the what we see coming our way and what the types of violations that we get. I just really want to, I think we should move to the training schedule and take a look at that. And then I think we would have enough of the structure to be able to send our staff back to do, to make further recommendations that we then take to the board.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to rush this, but Dr. Sronson's flight is taking off in about 10 minutes. So Dr. Sronson, if you'll jump to the last motion and then we can discuss if necessary.
Yes. So the last one was just a request to say, well, what are the benefits? Why a state level training? And this might be part of that discussion of, like, you can do a training schedule, you can modify this to be less frequent, right? Without providing any state level training support, just as Board Member Hart was speaking to. This is like, what is the added benefit? What value add does the state board bring if we are providing these modules, not for required use, but for optional use? And so just kind of thinking through that, came up with kind of 4 main benefits. One is it just reduces the administrative and financial burden at the LEA. They all have to make these trainings. We got, I think, 2 or 3 new trainings in session, and now all of them are going to be responsible to make those. Where at the state agency, we can make them, and as many LEAs who want to take us up on what we have, they can just use those versus 160 plus LEAs having to make their own. Obvious benefit there. The consistency across for educators. So when you're in this school district to this school district, you're getting the same content and getting that content reinforced. It also helps us when we know what some of those violations are, we can be really clear in our training to really help mitigate those moving forward. Obviously the cost savings, just the economy of scale of the state running that. And then the prioritization, like, we're gonna be able to say, here are the things, and you can do that with or without the training modules as I'm thinking about now, but just letting you get that feedback at the very end. But that was just a request from the committee, like why state training might be a benefit.
Thank you, Dr. Sronson. Okay, committee, any feedback on that? I mean, yeah, any feedback on that? Member Wood?
One thing we recommend when we're looking at this prioritization is these brand new trainings that are just being required. Are they kicked off? I know some of these bills go into effect May 1st. Some of these bills go into effect, July 1st. Are there trainings that are required this fall that none of our LEAs would have, that this would be a benefit to them right off the bat if we could prioritize those? Or are most of those trainings put off a year? I know sometimes the legislation will be moved forward. Do we know that yet?
In my review of the bills that did add, they all are for next year. So that might be feedback that I can amend the annual training schedule for the next committee meeting to have those newly required ones be the ones that we get done this summer, so that our LEAs can kind of rely on that support in the.
So I used to work with Charles. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Thronson. Good luck on your trip. Be safe. We'll see you when you get back.
Thank you. I apologize. It was scheduled for 6 and then it got moved to 2:30 and then it got moved to 10:30. So I was supposed to leave tonight. So thank you for your flexibility.
No worries. Thank you. Okay. So committee, you can see up on the board, we have a potential motion. I don't know if there's any more questions, if we want to put a motion forth and then discuss it, or if we want to put a motion forth and vote on it. Member Wood?
I'd like to
Can
put a
you read
motion.
that?
Oh,
I can't see it.
Yeah, I think Member Wood will put forward a motion.
Okay.
so I move that the committee recommend that the board approve the recommended makeup of the core user group, the identified training priorities, the three-year training schedule. And can I add with a discussion on potential funding?
Yeah, it's your motion. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to add with a discussion on potential funding for state modules.
So you're asking. Okay, yeah, I think Ben's wording it a little bit differently. That answers my question. So recommends that the board approve pending discussion regarding potential funding, the following, or do you
Well, I
want to see
think the
something
funding comes after. I want the core user group. I think we need one. You know, whether we do a state module or not, I think it's important for us to have a feedback loop for, you know, when these trainings are being offered. Does this calendar that we put together work? The identified training priorities. Are we doing what the LEAs feel is necessary in how we've created this schedule? And then the 3-year training. I think all of that comes irregardless of funding. I'd feedback on that. Well, I would like the funding discussion to happen at the board next. in April.
It will. I don't know if we can avoid that.
And
We can put it
so-
in there. The concern I have, if we put it as a fourth, we're asking that the board approve a discussion on the funding. But
Well,
that's
or
not-
we just have a board.
We
We
just-
move that the board discuss.
Yeah,
we-
my 4 was a
that could be
discussion
that
more
could
than
be
an
a separate
approval.
motion.
Separate motion. Okay, that's where the can came from.
And then
right.
the motion, now we have these 3 on here. I know in the beginning it was almost a suggestion that we just move that the annual training draft schedule and prioritization for development be forwarded to the full board. Or would you like to list them out?
So you want it simplified?
You mean, do we want to include the chart in the?
Well, everything's good. If you go to 1, 2, and 3, I don't know if there's a difference. And we're spending way too much time on
Yeah,
this, but
yeah.
the title, annual training draft schedule and prioritization for development, that's just everything that we've covered here. So if we're moving forward everything that we've covered here, then we might as well just move that forward.
So you just want a simplified motion to,
Okay.
Molly's got her
1, 2,
hand up,
Yeah.
but
1, 2, 3 does.
Molly's got her hand.
well, there's my motion. If someone wants to simplify and they move that, then by all means, go ahead.
Okay. Molly, you still have a
Yeah,
comment?
I'm just afraid if we word the motion that way, then we quite possibly are going to have, we're going to open it up to people wanting to break that apart and do things with it. I wonder if we said, we move to approve the annual training draft schedule and prioritization with a discussion on funding, if that would send it as a package rather than as individual pieces, parts. I'm okay with the motion. in creating the agendas and trying to manage expectations and time, I just see a potential. But you know what, if the board wants to send it back because they're concerned about one item, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we're being expedient and as concise as possible. I'm fine with it. That's just another option.
Could we put draft 2? Because I am going to update the draft as you guys recommended.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Thronson. Now get on your airplane.
Oh, I'm on it. They're taxing back.
Okay. Member Wood, I'm going to go back to you. I know you put forth a motion. I haven't repeated the motion yet. I know we're going off. I just want to make sure that.
All right, then I'm going to reword my motion that the committee recommend that the board approve draft 2 of the annual training draft schedule and prioritization with a discussion on funding.
Thank
Now
you.
you can repeat that one.
Thank you, Member Wood. The motion before the committee is that the committee recommend that the board approve draft 2 of the annual training draft schedule and prioritization with a discussion on funding. Any discussion to that motion?
I wondered
Member Lear?
sorry, I anticipated you. I wonder if we need to put optional. I just want to signal to all board members, everybody, this is not the board demanding or imposing this, but providing. So is there a place that optional would fit in there?
So we don't need a second, and so I defer back to Member Wood for her motion.
Is the training draft or training schedule or prioritization optional?
They're not, but the trainings are optional. And in terms of, and the trainings aren't, they're optional for use by you LEAs. That's my message.
Only if we create the modules would they be optional, but the training is.
Right. So it can't be optional training, but it has to be, let's see. Approve draft 2 of the annual training draft schedule and priors as an option for LEAs. As an option for use by LEAs? I mean, it's getting pretty wordy and clunky. I'm sorry.
The problem is since all this is combined, I mean, you're talking about the LEAs having an option to use the trainings that are provided.
Right.
This encompasses everything here. So do the LEAs have the option of the training schedule?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, to some extent, I think they do. I don't know. I mean, it depends on the training. Some of them are annual, some of them are biannual, some of them are.
So as long as they stayed with the law.
Yes.
It's their option to say USBE, you do your schedule, you do whatever. We're going to continue on as is.
Yes. Or they say we'll use trainings 1, 5, and 9, but not any of the others. Thank you very much.
So
follow up on that.
Yeah, Member Wood.
So potentially we could say these only have to be offered every 3 years, but as an LEA, if they felt there was significant issues in their district, they could continue to provide them yearly.
Mm-hmm.
So at minimum, they have to follow the law, but there is no upper boundary. So that's where it would be optional. So.
Right. And so I maybe, and if you tell me I'm overthinking this, I will agree with you. I don't want the message to be sent that these are being imposed by the board in addition to what the law requires. It's just a resource.
Yeah. And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if we're at that spot in this process yet. I don't know if this hurts or helps. I'm not opposed to it. Member Hart?
I hear you, Carol. But I think putting optional anywhere in the title is going to send a really mixed message. I think that any HR director or any superintendent is going to read the entirety, and we will make sure to put it in, our materials. But I'm sure Mr. Young and friends are going to read all the way through.
So Member Wood, I'm going to turn back over to you and look at this and see if this motion that is before the committee is still acceptable.
Yes, could I actually ask Superintendent Young for any feedback on, I would love to hear his perspective of all of this.
We
Given
are-
that he sat here all this time and listened to us,
I
is that
get that.
appropriate?
Well, we as a committee, remember, we had this
Oh,
discussion
we can't. Okay.
about calling out people in the public. So
Thank you.
if we want to do it as a committee, we're opening it up. But that's on, this is not a Matt decision. This is a committee call. And I thought that we had decided.
Well, I lived in the old days where we could talk during committees as a guest and people valued
I
our
know.
opinions. And so I love the old days.
I would like to hear from him just. Even though we made it.
You guys like to put me in a tight spot.
Sort, and anytime you can streamline, it's a good thing. So we absolutely appreciate the board for considering this and thinking of us and all of our teachers and staff that go through this.
Thank you, Superintendent. So we have a motion before the committee that the committee recommend that the board approve draft 2 of the annual training draft schedule and prioritization with the discussion of funding. Seeing no other hands, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
And that passes 4-1 with Vice Chair Carey in opposition. Thank you, staff and committee. We are moving on to agenda item 3.4, Academy for Math, Engineering, and Science waiver request. And do we have AAG Beal with us?
Yes, I'm here.
And
Okay.
Brett Wilson is with us as well. So AAG Beal, please.
Sure. So this is a waiver renewal request. It's been an existing waiver from the Academy for Math, Engineering, and Science. They are requesting a waiver of R 277-700-6, subsections 13 and 15, which cover 1.5 units of art and 1.5 units of physical education. And in their application, it's noted that they do have additional credit requirements above and beyond state requirements for math, science, and social studies and computer sciences. So I'll leave any other questions for them.
Thank you. And as far as I understand, this is a renewal or this has been going on for a while.
Correct.
And there's been no concerns. We've had good success from Ames with this renewal, this waiver. And I can direct this to Brett if he's willing.
Yes.
Will you state your name and title?
Brett Wilson, Principal CEO, Academy for Math, Engineering, and Science, Irvine College High School. We do require 4 years of math, 4 years of science, as well as an additional computer science requirement. We are a little bit different in that we are a school within a school hosted by Cottonwood High School. So we don't use this waiver as much as many of our early college compatriots because our students are supporting the arts and the athletics program at Cottonwood High School. So while this is important for us and we feel it's appropriate, a lot of our students are duly gifted and are very active in the arts with Cottonwood High School as well as with their athletics.
Thank you. Member Hart?
I'm ready to make a motion. I would like to make that motion and then we can talk about it. I'd just like to place it.
Matt, before she does that, can I?
Is that okay, Member Hart? Member Lear has
That's
a
fine.
question or a
That's
comment?
I just wanted to make it clear that I've worked with, provided legal services for Ames in the past, but have not done so for the last year plus, and loved working with them before retirement. But I wanted to make that disclosure to everyone.
Thank you. Member Hart?
I move that the committee approves Academy for Math, Engineering, and Science Ames request for a waiver renewal from R 277-700-6, 13 and 15, and forward to the board for approval. And why I have zero trouble with this waiver. Cottonwood High is now in my area, and I happen to have some conversations lately with some voters in that area, and who had students, past students in this program. And so I just had the opportunity to talk with parents about it. And there was unanimous support for this. And one question that I did ask, because they were former students, how are they doing? You know, you ask that all the time. And this change in requirements clearly didn't stop the students from being very, very successful. And I see no reason to go against something that has no evidence of adverse effects. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your putting forth the motion and your experience and perspective and feedback. So the motion before the committee is that the committee approve Academy for Math, Engineering, and Science, AIMS, request for a waiver renewal from R277-700, Section 6, subsection 13 and 15, and forward to the board for approval. Seeing no hands for discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, sounds like it passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3.5, Utah County Academy of Sciences, UCAS waiver request. And AAG Beal.
Yes,
If
so
you're
I'll
with us,
note
go
that
ahead.
there are four charter applications today that will sound kind of similar, but there are nuances with each. So this request from the Utah County Academy of Sciences is also for a waiver of R277-700-6, subsection 13 and 15, as well as R277-14, subsection 4, the 180 days requirement. So first, to address Rule 700, the request is to waive 1 credit of PE credits. They require a half credit of health and a half credit of PE already, and then to waive 1 credit of art. So they do provide 0.5 credits of arts. And they also require an additional credit above and beyond requirements for STEM courses. And then for the request under Rule 419, the 180-day requirement, that is because they follow the Utah Valley University's schedule. But given that they do still require over 990 hours of instruction, so they still have the hours, just not the 180 days.
Okay. Thank you, AAG Beal. I want to make it known that Spencer Wild is here with us as well to take any questions. And Member Wood.
Actually, I have a question for AAG Beal. Do we not have another rule in place that allowed us? I know we had a temporary waiver of the 180, but didn't we move ahead that we continued that rule?
I believe what we did is that we left the 180 days, but we removed the 990-hour requirement.
Oh, that was opposite. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions or discussion or motions? Member Lear.
I think it's just responsible to ask. Spencer, thank you for being here. You also had to sit through a long discussion that was probably, I'm glad. But can you give us just briefly, any anecdotal information about how this is working for your students? I thought it was helpful to hear from Brett that the students generally do take those classes anyway, but I just would like to hear your thoughts on how this is working for you.
Yeah, our usage is a little higher than
Brett,
it is.
or sorry, Spencer, will you
I apologize.
Will you just state
your name
for the public who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name's Spencer Wild. I'm assistant principal at Utah County Academy of Sciences. Our principal is unable to be here today, so she asked me to step in for her. Our usage of the waivers is a little higher than it is at Ames. It's about between 10 and 30% of our kids who make use of these waivers. The primary benefit is that our average high school senior graduates with 64 credits of university coursework already done. We offer PE on both of our campuses. We have a 9th and 10th grade campus and an 11th and 12th grade campus. And then most of our students, about 70 to 80% each year, will earn an associate's degree through UVU. And they have a required exercise science 1097 class that our students take through them. It's a 2-credit class. And so if they take our PE class and that one, they don't quite get the 1.5 credits of PE. We do require all of our students to take health. And so that's not a concern. All of our students also take 4 years of math and 4 years of science. And so it gives our students a little bit of flexibility. And I think one of the things we're really excited about that we're doing with that flexibility right now is working with our partner, Utah Valley University. We were just able to set up a program where our students will be able to finish all the prerequisites for their nursing program while they're in high school. And then they'll be able to step right into UVU's nursing program. And without the flexibility of these extra 1 or 2 credits, we wouldn't be able to finish that coursework ahead of time. So it gives us flexibility to do things that really are innovative and serve the needs of our students and really do give them a head start into their college education.
So helpful. Thank you for being brief and specific.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Member Lear.
I don't mind making that motion.
Molly, go ahead.
Oh, I said that and then hold on. It's right here. I recommend that the committee approve Utah County Academy of Sciences request for a waiver renewal from R277-700-6, 13 and 15 and R277-419-4 and forward it to the board for approval.
Thank you, Member Hart. The motion before the committee is that the committee approve Utah County Academy of Sciences request for a waiver renewal from R277-700-6, 13 and 15, and R277-4194, and forward to the board for approval. Any discussion to that? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Spencer. On to agenda item 3.6, InTech Collegiate Academy waiver request. AAG Beal, if you will, please.
Yes, absolutely. InTech's waiver request similarly is for a waiver from Rule R277-700-6, subsections 13 and 15. They are seeking a waiver of 1 credit of PE, so they still require a half credit, and 1 credit of art, and they also require a half credit of art there. And then they require an additional 1.5 credits from a combination above and beyond from STEM or college prep courses in lieu of the waived PE and arts credits.
Thank you. And do we have Jason Stranger with us on Zoom?
Yes, I am here.
Perfect. Committee, I'm wondering if we ask the same question that we've asked the other two to Jason. And Jason, if you'll state your name and position, and then kind of answer that same question of what does this waiver do for your students and how does it benefit your students in their education?
Yeah, so our utilization of this waiver in the past has been around 7% on average. The last 6 years we've had it for art, and around
Jason,
I think 23%.
will you just state, I know, I'm sorry, will you just state your name and what you do?
I got ahead of myself. Jason Stenger, I'm the executive director at InTech. And like I was saying, about 7% use the fine arts waiver and about 23% use the PE waiver. And with that extra time, our students are able to do more early college credits and also more CTE credits. And so our CTE pathway completion rate has shot up recently above 60%, which is well above the state average. Our students just have time to take those courses, as well as complete college credits. we asked our parents and students how many of them want to keep this waiver. That came in at 95%.
Thank you. Any questions, additional questions from the committee? Member Lear?
Just to flesh out your answer, Mr. Stanger.
Yes.
Did you, do your students also complete the requirements for, which university are you connected to? Is it
Utah
USU?
State. Yes.
Yes. So do they also complete an extra or a PE credit as part of that preliminary requirement to get their associates?
So Utah State does not have a PE requirement, but we still require some PE and some fine arts in our graduation requirements.
Okay,
Utah
but
State does
not
not
the same
have
as, not the same as UCAS. Okay, thank you. Just to clarify.
Okay. Member Wood,
I'll just go ahead and make the motion if that's appropriate.
please.
Okay, I move that the committee approve Intech Collegiate Academy's request for a waiver renewal from R277 700-16, 13, and 15, and forward to the board for approval.
The motion before the committee is that the committee approve Intech Collegiate Academy's request for a waiver renewal from R277-700-6, 13 and 15, and forward to the board for approval. Any discussion to this motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you, Jason, for being here with us. Moving on to agenda item 3.7. Member Carey is still on, I believe, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. 3.7, agenda item 3.7, itinerant early college high school waiver request, and AAG Beal, if you'll take this one as well.
Yes. So Itinerant's request is for a waiver of Rule R277-700-6, subsection 13 and 15 as well. In addition to Rule R277-419, subsection 4, which is the 180-day requirement. Here I'll note that Itinerant follows the Salt Lake Community College's schedule, and that their instructional hours exceed 1,092 hours per year. So well over the previous requirement of 990, even though it's on a shortened days schedule. They also require health credits, 1 credit of PE. So they're seeking a waiver of a half PE credit, and they require 1 art credit, so a half waiver of art, and they also require the additional credits in STEM or early college.
Thank you, Ashley. And do we have Renee Edwards and Rebecca Cisneros with us? Neither are. Okay, so it sounds like they're not online with us and they're not here in person. So we can't get the same feedback as the others. Committee members, do you have any questions that AAG Beal could answer? Molly, go ahead.
I want to make a motion, and after I make the motion, I'd like to explain why.
Okay.
I always do this.
While you're looking, Member Lear has a comment. Is that okay? If you want to
go ahead.
Get it ready.
Sure. I just wondered if Ashley has any information or data from Itinerant, that's who we're on, about their, about something like the percentages that we heard from the other directors of how many students use the waiver, any other kind of informative information. All information is informative.
Sure.
But if you don't, Ashley, that's fine.
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, I don't know what percentage of their students use use the waiver. The only helpful
Okay.
thing I can maybe tell you is that they've been operating under the same waiver since 2017, so for 6 years as well, kind of in a grouping with the other early college.
That's good enough for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Member Hart.
I move that the committee approve Itinerant Early College High School's request for a waiver renewal from R277-419-41A and R277-700-6, 13 and 15, and forward to the board for approval. 2 half credits in those areas is very minimal for what they can replace it with. I think that we should always honor the charters of charter schools and their mission. And these are students that are going into college in high school, and I think we need to align closer to what they're looking towards rather than looking back and trying to fit square pegs and round holes kind of thing. So I very much support this waiver.
Thank you, Member Hart. The motion before the committee is that the committee approve Itinerant Early College High School's request for a waiver renewal from R277-419-41A and R277-700-6, 13 and 15, and forward to the board for approval. Any additional discussion? Member Wood.
Just a comment from their waiver request. They did say that 81.3% use it to take more classes from Salt Lake Community College. So they did offer a great deal of data in their waiver request. So even though they're not here to speak to it, they did provide the information they needed.
Yep. Perfect. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we are on to agenda item 3.8. This is Duchesne School District, Altamont Elementary and High School waiver request. And again, we have AAG Beal.
Yes, the last waiver request of the day. So this is a request coming out of Duchesne County School District for a waiver of Rule R277-419, subsection 4, the requirement for 180 days, in a request to move to a 4-day school week. I know Assistant Principal Guffey is online. That's who I've been communicating with, as well as a few others from Duchesne County and Altamont schools who can answer any specific questions in addition to their application online.
Can we have, I see 4 faces on Zoom, and I'm not sure if they're with Duchesne. Can we just ask those that are with Duchesne, if you'll just state your name and your position, and then if we have questions, the committee can address them appropriately. And we'll start, since I see you, Superintendent Young, we'll start with you.
Yes, I'm Superintendent Jason Young with Duchesne County School District.
And that's it. Okay.
I'm Ronnie Guffey. I'm an assistant principal for the Duchesne County School District.
And
Thank
I am
you.
Lori Oman. I am the principal at Altamont Elementary.
And Jane Burnson,
Okay.
I'm the principal at Altamont High School.
Okay. Committee members, what kind of questions do you have? Let's start the conversation here. Member Wood, let's go ahead.
I would love to hear if you have any response to the concerns that were brought up earlier. I think most of you were there for our public comment. Do you have any responses? Seems like there's 2 camps here, and puts us kind of in the middle of an interesting conversation.
Maybe I can go first, and then principals, you can follow with anything else. The comment that caught my attention was that the process has been flawed. I'd like to speak to that for just a moment. We feel like it has not been flawed. We've gone through the process over an extended period of time and allowed a great deal of public input in a lot of ways, but ultimately a board decision, and the board made the decision they have to put us here today. Really quickly, just timeline: in April of 2023, in a work session, the board asked the district staff, myself and others, to deliver an opinion poll to determine interest in a 4-day week in the Altamont schools. We conducted that in May of 2023. It was open from May 4th to May 30th of 2023. It was sent to all the parents, the students and staff at Altamont High School and Altamont Elementary School. We did get some feedback that it had not been received by some people there. As our tech people tracked that down, there were some issues from our local service provider, but also we found out there were quite a few who had their notifications turned off, so they couldn't get through in our system. So various things there, but even at that, we felt like the survey was statistically significant in its aim of an opinion poll, and that we were able to get an accurate representation of the feelings of the stakeholders there. The board then took their time to study and to look through the research and many things. I think that our conclusion there is that you could find, if you sought it, research to support just about any position you wanted to take. So we tried to take a much more objective view and look at the research in the macro, so that we'd be able to get a better overall view. So the board took their time to do that. It was discussed again in the November 9th work session that we'd like to go forward and pursue further exploration with this. In the December board meeting, we met actually at Altamont High School. We had a presentation from the school community council member there, Ms. Alicia Jenkins. Extensive discussion there in the work session, and even more extensive discussion in the open time portion of our regular meeting there in Altamont that day. Basically, everyone in the room had multiple and ample opportunity to speak anything that they chose to, either for and against, and all of those opinions were taken into consideration. In January 11th, the school board meeting, it was again allowed open time for all to speak in this matter. The school board voted to allow Altamont High School to apply for the 4-day waiver, and Altamont Elementary School to continue further exploration. And it was my idea at that point, so I'll blame myself. We had hoped to be able to look at the possibility of Altamont High School going to a 4-day while Altamont Elementary stayed on a 5-day, and to explore those options. So we explored that extensively, and our business administrator and transportation director, we felt like there were some of those things that we assumed would be hurdles that we felt like we could overcome. It'd be around a $15,000 to $20,000 investment in transportation to double route those buses, but that we would be willing to do that if that was the will of the people there. However, there were other complications that proved too difficult for that to be a possibility. And so the schools, by the way, incidentally, share a parking lot. They are right next to each other on Main Street there in Altamont. And so those were too insurmountable to overcome. What's more, the January 22nd board meeting, we talked about that, and as well as wanted another opportunity for Altamont Elementary parents to be able to give their input. If Altamont High did go to a 4-day, what would be your preference then? Would you want to also go 4, or would you like to be different than them and go 5? That definitely came in much in favor of following along with what the high school did if they went to a 4-day, just so that the schools would be the same. That was the overwhelming feeling from our parents there. And then finally, February 8th, our board meeting in a regular board meeting voted to allow both schools to apply for the fee waiver. So it was a long answer, sorry, but I felt like our process has been very sound. There's been much input, and that our board acted in best interests that they possibly could.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Young. It's with the feedback. I don't know how big your Altamont, how many Altamont families do you have? Do you have those numbers in front of you? I'm sorry about this. Just I bring this up just because you have some concerned parents, obviously. You have about 180 people who are willing to sign this petition saying, hey, wait a second. We either weren't aware for whatever reason or we don't agree. So from where my perspective is that the community, although the district did its process by reaching out to the community and saying, hey, we're having these meetings, this is what we're going to discuss. It does sound like several people, and maybe I'm wrong, Superintendent Young, it does sound like several people, maybe when they get an email from the district, we're like, yeah, junk mail, right? And then a decision happens and it's like, wait, what? So it does sound like that. I understand that your district is larger than Altamont, but it does sound like that community in particular is saying, we're not ready for this. Not necessarily a majority, but a large chunk of a minority is what I'm suggesting here. So I'm not sure, I'll just speak for me. I'm not sure if this is something that we take some more time as the district takes more time and says, we need to address some of the concerns because there's a miscommunication going on out there. I don't believe that this is for ease or convenience. I believe there's a true purpose to helping students and families, but many of those families are missing what that is. So where I am right now is to say, pause for a second, have the district go back to the community and work some things out, get some more clarity, and then bring this back to us. And I get that that's quick, but I'm also looking at the work that we're doing here. But again, that's just one of 5. And so we're gonna open it up to other committee members. Member Hart has her hand up, and then I think Member Wood has another comment.
I have a clarifying question on the materials submitted. The Altamont High School survey data was did not ask, that was the survey, right? You didn't do any follow-up surveys after that? Is that correct?
Yeah, so all the survey, if you scroll just a little bit more, there are the enrollment numbers. And then demographics, keep scrolling downward there. Yeah, you'll be able to see that here momentarily. Keep going. There's a chart. Still going. So yeah, there was one of the surveys, I guess, was the May 2023. I think they've had others in the past prior to my time as superintendent. The school board member, there's the survey coming up next. The school board member who represents the Altamont area has been there for a long time, has talked about how there have been other surveys in the past as well. And his comments there, his perspective, as well as what we found here, was absolutely, there's no unanimous consensus here, of course, but it typically will come out around that 60, 65, 70 range in favor. And, like you see, there's just little, yeah, right there. Those percentages have been fairly consistent over the years, according to him. And that's pretty much where it came here. Around that 60 to 40 is actually well, I have the exact numbers on the percentage right here. It was 55% in favor of the 4-day, 32% in favor of continuing the 5-day, and 13%, give or take, no preference. And that's been fairly consistent throughout the community for a while. But I could speak, Principal Burnson or Ullman could speak much more to the reasoning behind.
Can I have a follow-up, please, Chair?
Yeah. Please.
Can I ask each of the principals if they queried their school community council, and if they did, what the results were?
Yes, ma'am. I'm Jane Burnson, the principal at Altamont High School. Yes, this has been in fact a move from our school community council that we, after the survey went through, this discussion of going into a 4-day school has been going on for many years, as stated. This is my second year here, coming from Salt Lake District. And so I am listening to my community members, my parents, and my school community council members here. And this is something that they had been asking because it has been brought up just previous, I guess, 2 years prior to my arriving. And it was not, it did not go through with the Duchesne County School Board. And so then many parents were asking if that could be renewed. The push was, there are reasons why, mainly to give a boost to Altamont, to the high school, because our numbers have been going down as far as participants here at school, also attendance, and our lowering academic scores. And so one of the things that they had asked is, because we have to travel for our region, athletics does put a little bit of a push on this, is that our students have to travel anywhere from 3.5 hours plus to get to another school. The other schools, there are 5 schools in our region, which is Region 22. They are all on a 4-day schedule. So one of the problems is that they are not allowed to travel until after school during their 4-week, but they do travel on Friday and Saturday. One of the things that would ease up our academic situation is to follow that same guideline of, we do our games and we travel on Fridays possibly. Others had said, if we had the 4-day and we were to combine it, we could see our students every day. We could really focus on our academics, getting those gaps filled, pushing our students towards their career opportunities that lie ahead for them in their future. And so the biggest thing from our teachers is that they would love to be able to raise our academic scores, have that time for academics, have a different time for athletics. And the school board, or the school community council approached me and asked, there was a survey last spring. What have we heard? Did we hear the results? What is the answer? Is the board going to allow us to move? So in early November, they sent a letter, the community council from Altamont High School sent a letter to the board asking, what is the status? This is what we would really like to see happen. It did not include the elementary at the time, but because our 2 schools are as was said, that we share a parking lot, we're very close on the same property and so on, that may cause a problem for the elementary. It may have our students staying until 4 o'clock in school. And if we had to do a dual bus route, that type of thing. And so those are some of the discussions that have been going on.
And at the elementary, the SCC, what was their position?
Mrs. Ullman, if you're on mute right there.
When our community council met, they were the majority in favor of staying 5-day, but they were more in favor, totally unanimous in saying that it would be a detriment to be on two different schedules.
Okay. And my last question is, how many hours of instruction would the adjusted 4-day schedule total?
We would actually, at the high school, we would actually increase our hours. Let me pull those up here for you. We would be moving to over 1,000 hours, so it would be 1,018 hours. Right now, we're just under the 1,000. So we're actually adding and doing a modified schedule to provide our core classes with a 68-minute time period, and then some electives, obviously, trying to fit in to a schedule, would be that same amount, or they would go down, the last 3 hours of the day would be a 45-minute, also including an intervention time in one of those 45-minute schedules or periods every day, where our students for math and English and science would be able to have an additional time to fill in those gaps, not for homework, not for extra study time, but it is to fill in the gaps that we've been missing.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Can
Member,
I just, sorry, Chairman, can I just
Go
add on
ahead.
to that really quick? Along
Sure.
with this schedule, I know some of those in open time commented that it wouldn't provide for concurrent enrollment. We've made sure that this schedule does work with our concurrent enrollment partners at this time, so students still would be able to participate in those activities as well.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the committee? Member Wood.
I would like some follow-up response regarding the elementary and some of the information that I've received through email. They said that there would be no afternoon recess, that was being taken away. Is that accurate? And also the food insecurity issues that they were talking about in terms of meals missed out on Friday, your percentage of socioeconomic free and reduced lunch. Any comments to that, please?
No, we would still have a 10-minute recess in the afternoon, 10 in the morning, 10 in the afternoon, and then a 15 during lunch. We are a Title I school, and so yes, there are some kids who rely on school lunch for their food. That would maybe be a hardship for their parents. We do have some parents who, whether we like it or not, use school for a babysitter. So that also is an issue, but no, we will keep the recess.
Member
I
Lear.
do have future survey data from the survey before, if you're interested in knowing those numbers that were done. There was a survey done by the community and community council in 2022. So I do have that data available if you're interested.
Member Lear, go ahead.
I just have a few concerns, and I'm just expressing them as concerns. So if you have a response specifically to these, I would love to hear it. I'm concerned you have a higher than usual, typical number of special education students. So I'm wondering if you have a plan or you've discussed how you would serve those students if they, depending on their IEPs. That's one of my concerns. A second concern is that usually these waivers are granted to schools that are much more, I would say, remote than Altamont is from Roosevelt and Vernal. And so that kind of remote, the transportation issue, though you've explained how you might have to adjust transportation. It could, I don't know if it'll cost more. It'll cost less, I'm sure, if you do it 4 days a week. But you've explained that, but the remoteness issue concern is not the same as the other waivers the board has granted. So special ed, remoteness. Thirdly, we've never had a request where the community was as divided. I understand your board voted, and that's really important to me because I really respect local boards and their decisions. But there is still in a small community a significant number that don't support this. And every other waiver that the board's granted, in my recollection, has been near unanimous from the community. So it concerns me a little that your community is feeling, whether it's accurate or not, like they were not, didn't have the opportunity to weigh in, or that somebody wasn't listening to them. But I'm reluctant to overcall the board that voted in favor of this. So if you have any responses to the special ed, the transportation, the divided community, I would really like to hear your information.
And we'll direct that to Superintendent Young, who can then direct it if he feels needed.
Sounds great. Maybe we'll start with the community a little bit, and I could address the remote. And Principal Burnson, if you would speak to the special ed part of that, and any other things that you or Mrs. Ullman would like to say, obviously. The divided community aspect of that, I'll go in reverse order. I feel like that the people have been listened to. I think our board has done a great job of listening. They fielded many, many phone calls and talked to people and their places of business and other things. And, in addition to this survey, of course, they feel like they've done a great job of listening. No, not agreeing with everything that's been said, but taking the overall will of the people, the majority of the people, to heart. So that was, we recognize the same thing, though, as far as not as unanimous as most of the others who have come forward. So that's something we've recognized as well, but felt like that it was still in the best interest, and the board voted the way they did after much deliberation there. As far as the remote aspect of things, we felt like that the biggest factor there for us wasn't so much remote in getting to and from school each day in and day out. We've been doing that for years, but remote in that our sports teams would have to travel so far and pull them from school so much. This would allow them to be in school much more, but it's not really an athletic decision. We felt we're very, very careful there that it wasn't just based on sports, but it was when such a large percentage of the school is missing for sports, quite often our teachers are very hesitant to move on in their curriculum. They're hesitant to go on to the next concept and introduce Pythagorean theorem, for instance. They tend to hold off until the next day, and those kinds of things. We felt like that we could increase our rigor and the academics a little bit better for all students, not just for sports. So that just a comment there. But Mrs. Burnson, anything to follow up there?
Yes, thank you. Agreed that the remoteness, most of our students are on the bus going to school and from school approximately 45 minutes. There is one bus that does take them an hour and 5 minutes in the morning and in the after school hours. So that has been something that has been done for quite a while. The other piece that I think that is really strongly put for our special ed, the majority of our students are resource students, meaning they might have one disability or something that goes through. These are not, the students here at Altamont are not in the essential elements area of the special ed department. we have approximately 8 students in that area that we do take care of here at our school in a contained classroom. However, the majority of students with an IEP is concerning. Just as I have been here, I find that there is a need for more work on our part to be able to have our students focus more on their IEP goals and such, rather than the homework and just getting caught up in class. And one of the things that we think would be very, very useful for going to a 4-day with that is that even our students with IEPs are on some of the athletics. So we're actually, if you really look at it, we're making it more difficult for families whose children do participate in these extracurricular activities, because then that takes away their Friday and Saturday because they'll be traveling. But at least it would really work towards redefining our school day, our academic learning day, which is what I'm all about. I love the sports and I love all the extracurricular activities that go on, but truly our job is to educate our students. And I'm finding that we should not be okay, and our teachers are agreeing with this, that being on an A-B schedule, some of our students who have participated in extracurricular have been, and our special ed, including those students, they could miss 2 class days a week because of during the week activities and Fridays. And that means that they've missed that particular class or 1 or 2 classes twice during the week. And so when they do come back, it's harder for them to catch up. It's harder for them to understand and get that learning in. So my focus, and I think what our teachers are focusing on, is being able to have our students every day in a 4-day work time where it is sacred time for academics and moving forward, and all extracurricular would have to be done outside of the school time. But we do have interventions set up for our special ed to be included every day. Besides having, we are considering doing the, oh, now I just lost my train of thought, but it's having a special ed teacher within our, in our tier 1 instruction, and then being able to help and be able to work with those students who need that extra point of learning based on their disability, and then also working towards having that added time during our intervention hour every day that will boost their IEP goals for success and also their preparation for their life outside of high school.
Thank you. Member Lear, does that answer your question?
Yeah, can I just a quick follow-up to, I don't want to take all the time, but so I'm kind of hearing, not sure what I'm hearing. If the student's IEP required services on the 5th day, you're prepared to provide those? Is that what you're saying?
They would have that in their schedule, their specified time for their IEP minutes and goals within working with a special ed teacher. They would have that every day in addition to the intervention 45-minute every day. And students, and that would include any student who does not have an IEP as well. They would go to their get their tier 1 experience, and then be able to have, if they are struggling in that class because of gaps or whatever and they may not have an IEP, so they would also be entitled to go to the intervention hour, as well as IEP students would have that time as well.
Intervention hour on Monday through Thursday, or would there be time on Friday?
No, this would all be done on through Monday through Thursday. If you will take a look on the proposed schedule, that there is a breakdown. There is a breakdown where students are going to their tier 1 learning. There may be a special ed aide or a special ed teacher in that classroom. And then later on in the day, in their 5th hour, we have all of our core teachers doing, and our special ed would be doing that as well, intervention time. And we are working out the plan that who who that would include, how we would distribute those students based on their performance in their classes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Member Hart, you have your hand up? Oh, you're muted, Molly.
I'm sorry. I would like to make a motion and then explain my motion.
Please.
I move that the committee approve Duchesne School District Altamont Elementary and High School's request for a waiver from R277-419-4 and forward to the board for approval. This is because the survey results, albeit closer than we have seen in the past, it still indicates, especially if you put the people that don't really have a preference in with the affirmative, the SCC results from both schools, the board vote, and the plan to address declining scores, and the fact that, you're always going to hear people say, this is this is about athletics and it shouldn't be about athletics. I think that point is very, very valid. When a teacher's classroom instruction has low attendance and for whatever reason, whether it's school activities or parent choice or what have you, that fractured classroom teaching affects everybody. And so I see, although I completely respect people, and I've read every word in the packet that was shared, and it's a very well put together packet. I just I see no place where the state board should overrule the SECs, the board, and the administration. In addition, it meets the hour requirement. So, and I know people say, well, I didn't get a chance to do the survey. Well, if we didn't have so many people blocking the school's numbers or just simply dismissing email, some of that would be taken care of. I say that as gently as possible, but that is a reality. And that's just not enough to overcome the fact that every single stakeholder that has put time into this has a yes vote. So that's my motion.
Thank you, Member Hart. I'm going to restate the motion, and then Vice Chair Carey has a comment. The motion before the committee is that the committee approve Duchesne School District, Altamont Elementary and High School's request for a waiver renewal from R277-4194 and forward to the board for approval. Discussion of that motion, Vice Chair Carey.
Yeah, I'd like to speak in opposition to the motion. Echoing what Board Member Lear said or touched upon, I've been thinking about all the requests for waivers we have received. And I think if we added up all the parents who spoke against those waivers, it might total the number that we have seen with this submission. And when I look at that kind of outcry, and I've looked through the packet and I really haven't seen, and this isn't to say it hasn't been done, maybe it just wasn't or documented, but I just don't see the secondary outreach, right? Like what happened to address these concerns? Because these parents still don't feel like those concerns were addressed. And I understand with the school activities, but my response to that would be that's the parent and the student making the decision. We're going to opt to do this versus that. And they can do that. But when we change this schedule, the parents are no longer making those choices. It's being made for them. So my vote could change when this goes to the full board. But right now, I would just like to see absolutely more outreach and bridge building between all the stakeholders. And that obviously includes the parents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, Vice Chair Carey. Member Lear pointed out a concern in the motion. This is not a renewal. Is that correct? So the motion, can we clean up that motion then?
I didn't say.
It's just, we just read it. Sorry, Member Hart. So can you see it?
I can't see it, but all I did was
Let me-
repeat the recommended action.
Yeah, I think we just had renewal on the previous four and it may have just got caught in there. So I'm gonna restate
The
what's,
recommended action was wrong.
yeah. So let me read this motion,
But
the motion before the
wait-
committee.
The
Go ahead.
recommended action says request for a waiver. It doesn't say anything about a renewal. That the
So let me, yeah, I must have just read renewal, so I'll reread it.
Oh, okay.
So the motion before the committee is that the committee approve Duchesne School District, Altamont Elementary and High School's request for a waiver form or a waiver from R277-4194 and forward to the board for approval. Any additional discussion to that motion?
Chair, would you allow one clarifying comment?
Sure. Yes.
I just, in full transparency and honesty, want to make sure that this is accurate. The School Community Council of Altamont High School was in favor of the 4-day. The School Community Council of Altamont Elementary initially was not.
Right.
They were in favor of the 5, but they did vote later. If the high school went forward, they would want to follow, just to make sure that's transparent.
Thank you. I want to speak to this motion just briefly. I will support this motion for the sake, because I believe in local control. And I believe that the superintendency and the board has a better grasp on this than I do. However, I would, and I know we don't make requests of superintendencies, but I imagine that in the few weeks, if this passes, the few weeks that are before us, before our next board meeting, we'll probably hear more. So I would hope that the school district does another outreach to parents to help clarify some of the concerns so that this is an easier decision, similar to what Vice Chair Carey's saying. If 4 weeks from now, I might have a different vote as well. But hopefully we'll have different and clarifying information. But again, I support local control. This is a difficult one. And there's obviously some cleanup that needs to happen. But with that, I'll turn time over to Member Lear and then Member Wood.
And I would like to second what Chair Hymas said. And the two issues that I would ask you again, just to request to make our vote easier in a month, that you would contact the concerned parents and discuss what possibilities there are for the special ed concerns that they raise, because that could be addressed by, depending on students' IEPs. Even if they need to be served on that 5th day, there's a way to do that. And second issue I have is the school meals. We became extremely creative during COVID. And if there is a way that, again, at a reasonable cost or under reasonable circumstances, you could address that concern. Those are the two issues I have, that if you could come back to us, if I'm just requesting, not demanding, but if you could have additional information about how those concerns might be addressed, and anything else that, well, those are the two things, without laying it on too thick, that I would love to hear more information about before our next, well, by our board vote in April. That would be really helpful to me.
I actually had come prepared to vote against this after listening to Vice Chair Hart and understanding and recognizing that local control issue. I will vote to move this forward to the full board. My question would be, again, as Member Laird said, the food insecurity issues. And also just that, you know, you have your survey, which I appreciated on the high school end, where it broke out parent, student, you know, community members. You know, we got this letter of 180 others, which it doesn't say parent, teacher, who are they? You know, if there'd be some reach out of, you know, are these the same people? And one time they said yes, and the other time they said no. You know, where's the consistency in data? But I don't want to. If this is something that's going to move forward, I think, you know, I had come prepared thinking maybe we delay this a month, but then where does that put you in your scheduling and everything if this is going to move forward anyway? So just some of that information outreach, I would love to hear more of that. And I will go ahead and move this forward with my vote.
May I ask a question, Chair? Mr. Chair? I was not aware of the petition and the letter or packet that was sent in. I would love to know who to contact to find that, where I can get that, so I can address those and that we can start to build our community and the communication, because I agree with the board that I do think that there is a division here, and if we want things to be successful, I think people need to be together. Although I think this is a great way to support our students, but we also need to follow what our parents and our community and make that work within the realms that the board has agreed upon as well. That's all.
Thank you. So I believe the packet was sent to Superintendent Young, who can maybe touch base offline, and the 4 or 5 of you, or however big your team is, can get together and look over that. So the motion before
I have one more follow-up.
Sorry, yeah, Member Wood.
Sorry. Just because I feel like if we move this forward with the division in your community, we don't set you up for success either. And so how if that can be mended before this is, you know, voted on by our final board, and maybe you'll always have, you know, we have that in our board, and that you can never come to full agreement on anything, but you can certainly work to hear both sides and to collaborate better.
Thank you, Member Wood. So the motion before the committee is that the committee approve Duchesne School District, Altamont Elementary and High School's request for a waiver from R277-4194 and forward to the board for approval. Seeing no other hands, we are going to do like a roll call vote. So we'll start with Member Lear.
Yes.
Will you just hit your mic so they can hear it?
Yes.
Member Wood,
Yes.
Member Hart,
Yes.
Vice Chair Carey,
No.
and Member Hymas is yes. So that passes 4-1 with Vice Chair Carey in opposition. Thank you, Altamont principals and Superintendent Young. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay. We are about 30 minutes away from the end of a meeting with 4 agenda items. So we are going to rearrange, if it's okay with the committee, some of these items based on need for getting out to the LEAs. So if we could first jump to 3.10, is there any opposition to jumping to 3.10?
What is 3
Okay.
hold on.
So let me just kind of read out. 3.9 is R277-115, Local Education Agency, Supervision and Monitoring Requirements of Third-Party Providers and Contracts. 3.10 is a R277-631, Student Toilet Training
Okay.
Requirements.
If you're only reading them for me, I'm seeing them now. Toilet training needs
Okay.
that. We need an answer on that.
Yeah, there's a couple of these where people are kind of anticipating and waiting. So if I can lay out the order, I'd like to look at 3.10 and 3.11. 3.10, educators are wanting feedback on this. 3.11, enrollment is starting. I know my daughter's enrolling now today. So there's some concern or some questions about that. And then we'll go to 3.9 and then 3.12. So hearing no opposition, let's go to 3.10, R277-631, student toilet training requirements. And here with us to get us started is Ben Rasmussen.
Thank you. Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. This is a new rule. We're asking the committee to look at draft 2. Just point out that the only change between draft 1 and draft 2 is on lines 36 through 40. We got some feedback from Chair Hymas that could be clarified a little bit so it was more clear what we were asking. So hopefully the new language on 38 through 40 is more clear of what is to be expected there. But essentially, if you look at the bill that results in this rule, it basically tells the board that they're going to put a number of things in rule, which rather than putting them in statute, they tell the board what they want in rule. So this is largely following the legislature's direction as to what they want in rule, with a couple things that we felt were needed as additions. We have Julie Clark and Christina Elegante if you have questions about the subject matter that can help with your questions.
Thank you, Ben. I will tell you, I went to my elementary principals and showed them this, and they were very happy. I don't want to say tears were there, but at least some choking up. So we have some pretty excited practitioners out there about this rule. Molly, go ahead.
I just want to make the point that it's not just for teachers, although my teachers did the exact same thing. What happens when a child is not toilet trained and they are in kindergarten? Other students make comments, and that labeling starts very early. And it's very, very, very hard to curb in the classroom. So-and-so stinks, so-and-so, oh, look, there's another mess. It is not in the best interest of the student to be in school when they are not trained. It's not just for teachers, it's for that student's well-being as well. That label can be carried with them into future grades. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments or motions from the committee? Member Lear.
I'm just going to ask, I was trying to find it, but I'm sure I'll get a quicker answer from Angie. As I read the rule, it doesn't explicitly say that a student will be denied enrollment if he's not toilet trained. And yet, as I quickly looked at the statute over Leanne's shoulder, it seems like that's the intent of the statute. So tell me.
Well, I think if you look at line 33, it says they may not enroll a student unless the student is toilet trained.
Okay. All right. That may be.
Do we need to word that differently in your view?
No, I was looking down at the new lines through 41-ish, 2-ish, but it says they may not enroll unless the student is toilet trained, but I guess we'll just have to play it out and see how it works, because I'm sure many parents are going to say their child is toilet, or it's only a fraction of the kids actually who are 4 and 5. So I guess we'll just have to play it out on a case-by-case basis, but I'm thinking that very few parents are going to admit that their child's not toilet trained. So I'm just, if it does say that, and it's a little bit contradictory with the compulsory, even though kindergarten, it's the kindergarten year that is not mandatory. It's not exactly kindergarten. So it's a little contradictory in that if they're supposed to be enrolled in school, but then they can't be enrolled in school because of something else. I think there's a bit of a dilemma, but I'm willing to say, let's see if the handful of children that I'm hoping this involves us, we can deal with it on a case by case basis.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member Wood.
I do have a question in regards to the code. It talks about a reintegration plan if once the student has become toilet trained. How, I guess this will be the LEA policy, but if they've, missed a quarter of kindergarten and now we're going to reintegrate them because now they're, I guess we just continually expect miracles from our teachers.
Yeah, we have Christine coming to.
Yeah, I mean, what, and how do we, is this in this rule?
That one? Okay. Christine Elegante, K-3 Literacy Specialist for the Utah State Board of Education. That's a really good question. We have had LEAs previously reach out about reintegrating students about this type of a thing the last couple of years. And usually, typically what they'll do is they'll work with the family to, hey, let's have your child come for this amount of time. And then they work up. That's LEAs already have that policy kind of in play. So that's kind of how that's going to work probably. Yeah.
Member Hart.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that there are plenty of kids that don't go to kindergarten and start school in the first grade. The teachers are, while I agree, we expect miracles from teachers. They already do that in a number of cases. So it's tricky in places where you don't have a parapro in addition to a kindergarten teacher, but I just like to point out that wouldn't be a new situation for those teachers.
Thank you, Member Hart. I'm going to go ahead and put a motion before the committee. I do want to recognize that Vice Chair Carey had to step off, so we are here at 4 members now for the public's information. So I'd like to, I move that the committee approve R277-631 Draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any discussion to this motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And that passes 4-0 with member Vice Chair Carey absent. Let's move to agenda item 3.11, R277-700, the elementary and secondary general core. And again, we have Ben Rasmussen.
Yeah, we'll invite Kathy Gray to come up while I'm introducing this if we could. So this comes as a result of a number of questions from the field about when it is appropriate to give high school credit for students taking courses in middle school. I think the feeling is that it would be helpful to have a clearer answer in rule from the board. And so staff has brought forth 2 options for the committee to consider possibly moving forward. In draft 1, the answer to that would be that middle school students, yes, absolutely can receive credit for their high school courses they take before grade 9. Draft 2, we've drafted the opposite way, if that's the committee's inclination, that under draft 2, a student cannot receive high school credit for courses taken before grade 9. So I would probably defer to Kathy Gray to give a little more background as to why this question has come up, and then we're happy to entertain your questions about the options.
Kathy, please.
Thank you. Kathy Gray, Graduation and Concurrent Enrollment Specialist for the Utah State Board of Education. I have had many phone calls from LEAs that have some middle school students who have gone beyond what they are expected to do in middle school and are picking up courses here or there. And they're doing that for their own extension, right? They're ready to move on. But they call and say, can we give them the credit that they've earned. Now, the SOEP has that allowed right in rule that the student is allowed to keep it. And so the inference has been that because there's a place where it specifically says a group of students can, that the inference is that the rest cannot. There is nothing in code or rule that would prevent that situation. And so that's why I'm here for the board today, to look to you for some guidance for these LEAs. Thank you.
And just to clarify, the language that you're going to want to look at is on lines 173 to 178 roughly in both rules. And then the only other change would be adding the oversight framework provision at the beginning of the rule.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Member Wood?
This is more of a comment. So my son was one of those who took classes through the Utah online school between 8th and 9th grade, and his did not count. And so I asked him, I said, do you wish that they would have counted? And he said, well, if you make them count, just make sure that people know that it counts for good. Because he said, sometimes 8th graders aren't prepared for that it counts. So just something to consider, that we are starting a transcript. Are they mature enough? Are they, as I look at his CE credits that he's got right now, some of them may not be as good on his college transcript as I had hoped. So yeah. Something to consider.
That's a great point. One that I hadn't considered yet. So thank you. Member Hart.
That's a very good point. However, I think that's the responsibility of the counselors in our required CCR meetings and when they do their high school planning. I know my child did as well, and it saved her actually as she ran into trouble in school. No, she wasn't getting in trouble. She just had some other issues interrupting school during the pandemic. Those credits were invaluable. I would like to make a motion, please, and then we can talk about it, but I won't put one on the floor.
Yeah. Yep.
I move that the committee approve R277-700 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. I think that if we truly believe in competency-based education and we believe in meeting the needs of both high-level students, high-achieving students, and students who struggle, I see no reason for a student who takes a course that is the exact same for high school, simply takes it earlier, cannot receive the credit. That first of all, we wouldn't have to do waivers if, as quite possibly, if students had more room in their schedule for things that interested them. Secondly, well, I could go on a long time. It puts smaller high schools in a bind when the student has taken the course, but still needs a certain number of credits for, say they take a math class early because they're on that progression through middle school. Then they get to high school, they still have to take 3 math classes, but the school a smaller school may not have a lot of math classes beyond their normal trajectory. So then you got students that have to take, if they can, a concurrent enrollment. I just think that there's no, other than exactly what, making sure they understand the consequences. There's no other reason to not allow that credit early.
Thank you, Member Hart. Member Lear.
I'm not a fan of this. I'll be really honest. I don't think that 13 and 14-year-olds are, if we have good, strong high school classes, I don't think 13 and 14-year-olds in the mainstream are prepared to fully understand. And, you know, now I've had 3 kids past that age and many grandkids in that age group. So I've had a fair amount of experience in addition to teaching high school. But I'm not thinking many 12, 13, 14-year-olds have the maturity to understand and fully process a high school class. So I'm not a huge fan of this, generally. Even though I believe in competency-based education, I just think competency from a 13-year-old is different than competency from a 17-year-old. But having said that, I can't stand the idea that we would be pushing students or families toward online education in order to do what they think is best for their kids. And I don't say that dismissively. I say, if they want their children to do online education, that's great. But I don't want them to do it because they can earn all these credits and be doctors at 19. I've seen enough kids that that's not the norm. I'd rather personally leave this to the individual decision-making of LEAs like it's been for 50 years so that they can assess individual students and their circumstances individually. Not have a blanket rule. It's not going to happen, especially given that SOEP, it's already allowed. So given that information, we're not going to undo the SOEP situation. So given that, I reluctantly support draft 1 and wish that we would increase, and this is piling on teachers again, but increase the rigor, and that's overused word, but the high school courses so that it's meaningful and not something a 13-year-old, the typical 13-year-old, not Doogie Howser, can accomplish. Because I don't see that a 13-year-old should be able to, in most circumstances, interact with other 17 and 18-year-olds and have a meaningful academic experience. So I'll support the draft 1, but it's reluctantly and wishing things were a little different.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member Hart.
Short comment, just as a middle school principal for a very, very long time, what the students were taking really had to do, like, so many students took the PE requirement. Many other students took actually the financial literacy class. What they're doing is they're clearing out space in their schedule to take something else. The other one is, in fact, math, where the school has them on an advanced trajectory. There is a little bit of foreign language for people that come out of that don't want to continue in dual immersion, but they're far, far more advanced than what they need. So they go maybe to, there's some really great online opportunities for that, believe it or not. And so there, it's not, you don't generally see the English or the science. In fact, I would venture to say I've never seen that in 20 years. So I just want to make the point, just as a somewhat assurance, that a lot of this is kids taking PE over the summer, really. So just want to make that point.
Thank you, Member Hart. So the motion before the committee. The motion before the committee is somewhere. It's on the screen. The motion before the committee is that the committee approves R277-700 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any additional discussion? There was an option brought up that we can discuss here. We can discuss it at a future time, but 175, Ben, if you'll pull up line 175. Here it says, an LEA shall recognize high school credits earned before grade 9. If that were changed to a may, I'm sorry. Deputy Stallings, will you take over? I'm going to go get.
Yes, happy to. So earlier this week, when we met with some superintendents and charter leaders, the feedback, and there wasn't a unanimous decision on shall versus may, and I'll explain to you why. But one person asked whether that shall should be a may to give LEAs the discretion to determine when providing credit would be appropriate or not. And the people who spoke, quote unquote, against changing it from a shall to a may were concerned that that might mean that some LEAs would adopt the practice and others wouldn't. And that the concern could be that if a student was, and I'll just use 2 districts that are near each other, let's say that Salt Lake City School District says, we're not going to implement this, we're going to say no to all students, versus Granite says yes, then you've got some students being treated differently by the general system in whether those courses apply or not. And so at the end, there wasn't a consensus recommendation from the group to say, change it to a may. But based on the comments that were stated, that is always an option as well, as to change the shall to a may, but there may be some unintended consequences where students would have access to those credits, in the middle school years in some LEAs and not in others.
Yeah.
Let's go Member Wood and then Member Lear.
The concern I would have with May is it starts setting up some judgmental perspective of, well, I really like this provider who gave you that credit in 8th grade, but I don't like this provider. So we're going to, as long as they take financial lit through this line, yes. But, because my son's online financial class, I think took him 4 hours. There might be one that takes 14 hours. Well, as an administrator, I take the one that's 14 because I think he's going to be better prepared. So I would be concerned with the may.
Thank you. Member Lear and then Member Hart.
And in many ways, I like the may because we've always left granting credit to LEAs. And I like that. Line drawing. I like that certainty. It's an LEA's decision how to give credit and when to give credit. I just much prefer that. I'm concerned, though, that it's similar to Leanne's concern. It also leaves parents uncertain until graduation time whether the LEA will accept it or not, and I don't think that's healthy. So in a better world, I would love the may, where we had more respect for the discretion and the wisdom of principals or superintendents who make this decision. But right now, I think we're better off with the certainty of the shall. But I think we need to sort of keep, and I know it would be really anecdotal, but I'd love to keep tabs on how districts, LEAs think this is working.
Thank you. Member Hart.
And I do trust it's not a matter of trust for me or respect of administrators or districts or LEAs or boards or anybody, but I do agree that it needs to stay a shall and not may. And I'll tell you why, because we always have to err on the side of the student and be cautious in the direction of student. And if a student moves from one district to another and suddenly their credit doesn't count or is contested, we see that when students go from a trimester to a semester school and they get caught in the balance. I just feel way more comfortable leaving the decision on when students take what to the parent and student. So I'd like to keep even though I usually like the may for many reasons, this one needs to be clear to students, parents, and school officials.
Thank you, Member Hart. Let me refer back to the motion then. I appreciate the feedback on this and the discussion. And who knows, when it comes before the full board, might have another discussion. So let's refer back to the motion before the committee, and that is that the committee approves R277-700 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any additional discussion to that motion? Member Lear.
I just want to explain my vote. I'm going to vote for this now, but I am in the between now and when we have it discussed with the board. I'd like to talk to some of the LEAs I work with and others that I know and see. I'm just increasingly worried about encroaching on the LEA's authority to give credits and telling them how they shall and shall not give credit. So I kind of reserve the right to vote differently in the board meeting is what I'm saying.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes 4-0 with Vice Chair Carey absent.
Okay.
So we are, let me just take a second for. Okay. So. Okay. So I apologize to the public and those online who are having to wait in silence, but we are going to move on to 3.9 R277-115 Local Education Agency Supervision and Monitoring Requirements of Third-Party Providers and Contracts. And we're going to turn time over to Ben Rasmussen.
Thank you, Chair. So we put this on for a discussion item. This is approaching its 5-year review. We need to take action by the full board no later than the May board meeting. In reviewing this with staff to see if it was appropriate to tee it up for a continuation, the internal audit team identified a number of considerations that have come from recent audits and monitoring that they felt that the committee might want to consider and that there might be amendments needed. Our hope was to kind of have some time to discuss this today so that we could decide what amendments to draft for you and bring in April. Looks like time is going to be limited and we're going to be hard pressed to do that. But perhaps if committee members can look over the considerations that were posted on Civic Clerk, if you have feedback on those and can provide those to either myself or to Audit Executive Debbie Davis, we'll bring this as an action item in April where we'll certainly continue it and hopefully may be able to consider some amendments at that time.
Now for the committee, we're okay to go till 12:30 if needed, but we do not want to go beyond that. So let's what kind of
questions?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Can
thinking.
You come up?
It's 12:14 now. We have 1 minute. Is the committee okay to spend a few minutes on this? And then we will need to readdress our final committee or our final action item 3.12 at another meeting. So
Can you just maybe take a minute and kind of go through what your concerns were or what you identified?
Absolutely. So internal audit, we like to look at things through the lens of risk. So when
this
Ben kind
is,
of asked.
sorry for the public. This is
yes,
Deb
Chief
Davies.
Audit Executive Debbie Davis. I apologize. My voice is a little rough, so I apologize about that as well. So internal audit, as I mentioned, we look at things through the lens of risk. We like to pose things as questions. So we're not saying that any changes to this rule are needed, but of course the board could consider if changes are needed based on some of the questions that are posed. A few years ago, we did an audit of education service providers and noted several concerns, things like contracts and background checks, that we don't have a lot of data in this area. We're not collecting it, and so we don't have a lot of information. So some of that is you can see in the questions here. Have we sufficiently addressed the items that came up in that audit? Recently, we know that legislative audit is looking into this a little bit. They're doing an audit of My Tech High, which would be a service provider, a third party. So there are people interested in this area. We know that third parties, it's kind of I won't say new to education, but it definitely has a role in public education, and it's impacting education in several ways in the curriculum, the education that's provided, and then funding for LEAs as well can be impacted significantly. And so based on some of those recent things that have come up just in the last year or so, and then with the audit, might be prudent to take a deeper look at, is this rule, are we achieving what we want to with these third-party providers in providing that supervision for the public education system? So that's essentially what these questions are. It's probably not an all-inclusive list. Financial operations, teaching and learning, they might want to weigh in also, but we thought it prudent to at least have a discussion about, are changes needed or is it working?
I see the list here of 6, right? Oh, you guys are great. How involved, and maybe this isn't I don't think it's on here. I feel like sometimes our LEAs are getting a third party and then they're just saying, okay, you do you. And right, we have this contract, but how involved are they? This rule, if I understand it correctly, says that LEAs are accountable for who they contract with. But then we're seeing in some instances where it's months or sometimes even years later where they say, we didn't know this was happening. We're going to clean it up now or cut ties or whatever. So in an audit, do we get to see how tightly connected the contractor is with the LEA? If it is kind of is it a quarterly checkup, a yearly, how things go? Like how formal does it get? Is that worth looking into? Please.
Okay, so Chief Audit Executive Debbie Davis again. It's a great question. And the ESP, the Education Service Provider audit that we did, attempted to look at that a little bit, really to say, what's the criteria to be an education service provider? Does the LEA know what that is? And so that they know that hey, this rule applies to me as I, look. And the rule is pretty specific about, you have to have a monitoring plan. You need to keep documentation of the plan. And we did find in that audit, there are a lot of problems with the contracts, that they're missing elements. A lot of that related to, again, data, those kinds of things. So that was missing, but also the monitoring plans, some of them did not align. They said, well, this is our monitoring plan, but then what they actually did wasn't that. So we did find those things in the audit. This is an area maybe Deputy Superintendent Stallings, as we're kind of considering, what category would this rule go in? Is it a 1, 2, 3, 4? How much oversight does the State Board of Education want to have in this area? So you could consider risk and impact, but yes, the audit that we did previously did identify concerns in the area that you mentioned.
So is there, if I'm understanding correctly, you're seeking feedback on whether we just continue this rule or if the board feels like amendments are needed? For me, as I looked over this, I didn't feel like amendments were needed. Is there something that other committee members here or staff felt this would actually be helpful, maybe to you as an audit department or in other areas, or do you feel like continuation is appropriate?
Okay, I'll jump in again. Debbie Davis again. I know. Okay, I'm happy to share my opinion. Auditors are, that's fine. Really, it comes down to this policymaking decision about how much oversight do you want to provide in this area, or is the local control sufficient? Recognizing that when things happen, which this year there was a significant question about funding that came up, and it's okay, that happened. We weren't really involved because we weren't providing a detailed level of oversight. And maybe that's completely fine, but maybe it's not. So really it's, again, just that question of how much oversight does the board want to have in this area? And it could be fine as far as, yeah, continue. I say at least continue it. Yes, for sure. Have the requirement to have a monitoring plan so that if someone comes back and asks questions, we can say, yes, we require them to have a monitoring plan. Did they? I mean, that could be a question that's answered later if we're not looking at those or anything, but at least it establishes a criteria so that we could, in the event that something happens.
Yeah.
So I'd say, yes, at least continuation. If you want more oversight, then I would say probably changes to the rule would be needed.
Thank you for I'll just give my individual thoughts here is that I appreciate the rule as is. I appreciate the ability for LEAs to sign their own contracts and to be held responsible for their own actions. And I get that we're watching some consequences unfold. And sometimes they're anyway. But I think that if we as a board start stepping into that, I wonder how many more FTEs we're going to have to provide, how many more visits we're going to have to go do. How, it just is, it's going to have fingers extending throughout. And I personally don't think that that's the role of the agency. So I would, after that, I guess I have a motion after this, after all of this, but I appreciate the rule as is what I'm saying. Member Lear, and then Member Hart.
I have so many frustrations. And so just kind of, this is my expression of frustrations. And I don't know if it's contrary to what Chair Hymas just said or not, but I think we've been talking about this and trying to do something about this for 3 to 5 years at least. And we get consistent pushback from policymakers. I'll be vague. And we get pushback. Certainly we get pushback from the third-party providers who don't want any more oversight. And yet, though I totally supported the board stepping in and helping a recent victim, and it's not victimless, but victim of one of these third-party providers. We stepped in and to the tune of a lot of money. And if we had 3 or 4 of those a year, which kind of benign monitoring might encourage, then we can't afford that. And it's just not a good practice, because what we're doing is we're saying, in lieu of monitoring, we're going to just somehow find the money to save you at the once you're over the cliff. So I don't like that either. But I also am so tired of banging my head against the wall with this issue when we get consistent pushback because there are, I'll just say it, because there are vendors involved that some policymakers like. And so it's just an exercise in futility. So I kind of like your idea, and I didn't, in all honesty, I didn't review the rule carefully enough, but I'm sure you can tell me. I wouldn't mind requiring a monitoring plan for LEAs of their third-party providers. And just so that leaves it in their hands, in their lap, you tell us how you will monitor them. And if there is something already to that effect in the rule, then maybe we need to just be a little more diligent in, I don't know who that would be, because there's not a specialist over third-party providers. But I don't know. There is. Yeah, there's not, and there's not police. We could use one, but we don't have one. So I think we need to, maybe if the rule says that, we need to think about how we could enforce that, because we cannot afford to keep picking up the pieces similarly to what we did very validly recently. We can't afford it, and it's not responsible.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member Hart, and just a reminder to the committee, we are at 12:25. Hit that mute button.
Thank you. I think I'm saying close to what Carol was, but in a pretty blunt way, if we are going to give LEAs the freedom to do these things, then they also have the responsibility of the outcome. And they should not expect that the board or the legislature spend money that could be going elsewhere when things go wrong. They can't have it both ways. That's not acceptable. It's not fair to the rest of the system. So I understand I need to think a little bit more. I'm all for moving it forward, but in all truth, I'm going to be considering whether or not we could use some amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hart. Member Wood is next, and then Member
Sorry,
Lear.
I know you have like 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Well, yeah.
Just a question regarding past. Is there anything missing in this role that would have prevented that? Was there something we could have done differently? Did any of it fall on our shoulders in this role, or is it just, if we leave it as it is there, could that repeat itself? Like if you don't learn from the history, you tend to, then you repeat it. So what could have been done? And is this role anything to do with that?
So then I think it goes to internal control systems surrounding, okay, if our objective is, sure, utilize these educational options, but we have to make sure that's done with accountability. So we implemented, hey, you have to have a monitoring plan and you have to have documentation of that. And that is on the LEA. We're not collecting that here. So if that internal control system is implemented with fidelity, hopefully that would have headed off a problem. It didn't. So either it wasn't implemented with fidelity or is an additional level of oversight. You have to submit your monitoring plan to the State Board of Education and we will do something with it, at least look at it or something. Could that have helped? Possibly. Could there be things around, we do have in the rule, hey, it's the LEA that has to enroll the individual. That is true. Some third parties will assign people for enrollment. Is that appropriate? So you could look at relationships or things like that as well. So maybe there's a couple things to tweak, but it really comes down to if internal controls are implemented.
Let me ask the committee. We're at 12:28, which it sounds like there's. I know where I sit and where I'd like to help staff and direction. But if there's more concern or discussion that needs to happen, I think we can bring this back to a committee. It doesn't have to go to the full board. So. What Ben?
We can't take any action today anyway, so we'll bring it back next month for action and then
Okay.
Can I make a comment of less than a minute in length? I would like, especially if you'll bring this back, to have some ideas from Debbie. I don't know if I need them completely fleshed out or just concepts that understanding that minimally we only have the manpower to do. Could you bring back some ideas of what we could add to the rule that might clarify to LEAs what Molly said? And short of, we're not going to be able to monitor their monitoring plans, but let them know unequivocally, if you don't do this, this is not something where the board's going to save you. That's all, Matt.
Thank you, Member Lear. So, thank you. I appreciate it. And I actually look forward to the discussion moving forward. And Ben, will you, so these 6, are these answer to Member Lear's questions, or are these different? You were asking, what direction? And I think that we have considerations for policy making here. So I guess Debbie, you have something.
Well, essentially, I could take, I mean, these are question format to see, do you want more information on this? Could we propose language or ideas to answer the questions? Yes, I didn't want to presume if you weren't interested in it. I didn't want to spend the time on it, frankly. But yes, if there is interest in, hey, bring back some ideas that would be answers to these questions, absolutely, we can do that.
Okay.
And my only word is minimal. I just want to see some minimal suggestions related to these questions.
And I think 5 and 6 definitely are areas where the past has been, some of that clarification may have supported that, correct? Okay.
Okay. So we are at 12:30. Just a reminder, 3.9, which we're discussing right now, we're going to see on a upcoming committee, and then also 3.12 research data sharing agreement with Department of Health and Human Services. We will move to another committee as well. So with that, we are going to adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.